Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome to the program. It's time for the Jeff Gerstmann Show. It's a podcast about video games. I'm your host for this week's show. My name is Jeff Gerstmann, and we've got a boatload of things to talk about in the news, and the world of video games. All the latest 3DS software will be discussed here loudly and proudly. I had to buy a new monitor. I had to replace my LG. I bought one of the first the first version of the LG OLEDs that came out, the 27-inch 1440p monitors that are lovely. It was a lovely monitor. But one problem it had is that sometimes when you had HDR turned on and there was a bright flash, the entire monitor would basically shut down. It wasn't even shut. I couldn't even push the power button to turn it back on. It was just like, this monitor has gone black and it is done. And I would have to reach around, and this would happen a lot of times during streams. So I'd have to give my monitor a reach around and pull the power out of the back and plug it back in order to get it to work again. And this happened a couple of times early on, but really not that often. And it started happening more and more frequently. I started looking it up a while ago, and I could find one other person that was like, yeah, that happened. And I RMA'd the monitor and got a new one and all this other stuff. Mine's like way out of warranty at this point, but I probably will still contact them and see about getting it repaired. But in the meantime, it was one of those situations where it's like, hey, the show must go on. I gotta do something here. And so I started researching a new. I like this monitor. I like the form factor, the basic idea of a 27-inch 1440p monitor that runs at a stupid frame rate. Esports ready. And so that sort of kind of narrowed it down to like a handful of panels that are all the rage these days. I didn't spend too much time looking at ultra widescreen monitors because I have 3 monitors here. You can't see them, but trust me, they're here in a big giant H formation. For when the giant H fights start up again, I will be ready. I want to be ready for a giant H fight. You don't want to get caught with your pants down when the giant H fights start up again. And so I've got 2 vertical monitors on either side, and then I've got my main the OLED here in the middle, and that's been a really good form factor. I could see, if you wanted to get a little nuts, maybe you stack another monitor on top of this one and you have 4 monitors, or maybe you stack one on top and then have one on the side or something like that. That might be an interesting alternate layout that, if I get this other monitor repaired, I don't know. I don't know what I'll do at that point. But I found myself in a situation where I need to get a monitor nowish, because it's just happening more and more and more and more. And so that led me down. I hate, dude, researching monitors is one of my least favorite things to do. And I settled on a couple of models of monitor that I'm like, these look really good. Of course, those are just gone. You cannot find them right now. And so like the monitor from MSI was very well regarded across the board. There was another one that was up there as well that was also pretty much hard, like impossible to find at this time, which makes you wonder, like, you start to look at it and you're like, okay, I'm between cycles, or I'm buying off cycle. Like there really is new shit around the corner. Like LG back at CES this year, LG announced that they had a 480 hertz panel. That means 480 frames per second, if you can achieve that, in a 27-inch 1440p display. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But like, they announced that back in January. There has not been any additional info about it. It is supposed to come out at some point this year. And so it was a feeling of like, well, could I wait and see if those screens start to come along? And like, maybe. But no. As the monitor kept blacking out over and over again, it was like, okay, I got to make a move. And so like the second choice or third choice, basically, you know, that like they're all kind of the same panels, and a lot of like right now the 480 hertz screens are not out there, but 360 hertz screens are out there. And so the old monitor that I replaced was a mere 240 hertz, which is like, what is that? Throw that in the van. That's trash. That's just a trash 240. And so I ended up with this Alienware monitor that is fairly well regarded. The one issue with it is that the HDMI ports do not do full HDMI 2.1 bandwidth, which is fine because I'm not plugging much into the, like, I have my capture card going out to that port, and nothing on the RetroTink is going to is going to require HDMI 2.1 full bandwidth or anything like that. So whatever. So I ended up with this Alienware monitor, which is, it's got a pretty good warranty on it for burn-in and some of that other stuff, which is kind of nice. The only downside was that HDMI thing. So that showed up last night. So I spent some time rewiring everything to get the new monitor wired up. It's Adele. I mean, the singer Adele. I mean, she made this monitor. No, Dell bought Alienware a long time ago, and they just, at some point, Alienware became their sub brand for the fancy shit. I think Alienware PCs are still like, look, if you're buying a fucking PC, here's my advice to you. If you're buying a PC, is get one that is a box. Get one that's a box that's not fucking round and doesn't have bulbous bulbs all over it. Get one you can set a drink on top of. Get a PC that you can stack up if you need to. Get a PC that'll fit into somewhere without being like, oh yeah, you can't put anything at all on top of this. The last Alienware, I ended up I have an Alienware in the garage that's from like 2020 or so, 2021. You can't stack anything on it. It's all and it's just very annoying. It's also a very small case. Like I think if I was going to use that machine for anything real, I would recase it into something that could hold some fucking hard drives, because sometimes you just need some fucking hard drives, man. Like, I'm not living this lifestyle where like, oh, this is just a gaming PC, so it only has 2 SSDs in it. I'm like, yeah, this is a gaming PC, so it's got 2 SSDs in it and like also 30 terabytes of storage for other files. For playing a lot of video games, new and old. Yeah, so I don't know. That's my philosophy on personal computing. So I don't know. I played a little bit of. I was just like, what do I play on this to test this frame rate? And so I loaded up Call of Duty and ran around as Cody Rhodes and did crossroadses to people in the new mode that's in there. And I was like, yeah, this is nice. And then I realized, like, why does this feel like shit? And I was like, oh, because frame generation is turned on. And so the input latency feels like trash. So as soon as I turned that off, it felt fine. I don't know, man. Graphics cards. Is this all going to go bust? You know what? Hold that thought. Let's take a break. Let's come back. Let's talk about if is the end of AI going to destroy video games as we know it along the way? Are they going to be a sad casualty of all of this stuff? I'll be right back. We'll be right back. You selling stuff online? Or, I mean, just looking to get into selling stuff online? Whether you've got 0 sales, 1 million sales, or somewhere in between, Shopify is here to help you do your thing. What is Shopify? Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. That means if you are just getting started, Shopify is there for you to create a very handy web presence, handle all your sales, or hey, if you're just looking to offload some of that stuff, you've sold millions already. Shopify is there to help you grow. They've got all the stuff you need. Whether you're selling scented soap, outdoor outfits, whatever you've got, they're all in one e-commerce platform. And their in-person POS system, it does. Hey, look, wherever or whatever you're selling, Shopify has got you covered. And they've got analytics if you want to see how things are going and you're like, we need to make some tweaks here and there. They've got the numbers you need to succeed. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout. That's 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way, because businesses that grow with Shopify. I've been on both sides of the selling stuff online stuff, of like building your own stuff, and we're going like, how are we going to handle credit cards securely, and what are we going to do all of that stuff and cobbling this together. And I have also been on the side of using Shopify. Shopify made a lot of those decisions very easy and made a lot of that operation very turnkey. You know, you're just like, okay, here's the shirts. Here's some pictures of people wearing the shirts. Here's a paragraph of text about the shirts. And Shopify, you can skin it up and make it look a lot of different ways to better fit the look and feel of your particular business and all of that. There's just a ton of options. You know, you can coupon codes, like all the different stuff that you want to do with a shop. Shopify is there to help make it happen. You can sign up now for a $1 per month trial period over at shopify.com/Jeff. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Jeff right now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Jeff. And thanks to Shopify for sponsoring the episode. Okay, we're back. So that the market is recovering a little bit today. I don't know. I'm not like one of these guys that like follows the stock market, but like yesterday was one of those legendary days over the last few years here of the market tanking, and one of the cited reasons, there's a few different reasons, but one of the few different reasons cited for the stock market kind of taking a big shit yesterday was that everyone is finally getting shook by the concept of AI and the idea of like, oh, this is not going to make any money maybe ever, and if it is not going to it's not going to happen soon, even if it does. And like what one of the longtime OpenAI guys basically was just like, I'm going to go on sabbatical, and bailed out in the middle of all this other stuff, and that maybe people are waking up to the idea that like this whole like LLM model of like chat assistant and all this other bullshit is maybe not something that is going to solve any real problems for any real people. And so the idea of AI as being this big takeover thing maybe is a little far-fetched. You're starting to see some of that. It was like Goldman Sachs a couple of weeks ago was just like, hey, this seems like it's a fucking money pit that you idiots are throwing fucking dollars into forever. What are you doing? And so, I don't know. The part of that, I think, was caught up in NVIDIA is delaying the launch of their next set of hardware, Blackwell, I guess. There's been talk that they've run into a snag there that has led to, maybe it's like a 3-month delay, is I believe what the word is right now. But that basically that also set off some alarm bells around like NVIDIA's ability to provide, and what does that mean for the timetable of all these companies that are throwing billions into a fucking fireplace, or 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 like building their cloud centers. You should read if you're interested in this topic in like a real way. Ed Zitron, who runs a PR firm of all things, has started a tech newsletter where he's got a very even head about this stuff. I believe it's where'syourEd.at to get to his newsletter. He's been covering this stuff really in a way that like the tech sites are way too breathless to cover. They're just like, look at this. It's like you clip it to your shirt and you can talk to it and it's a friend. And it's fucking terrible. And you're like, this is terrible. What the fuck? Like any sane person looks at this and be like, what are you peddling here? And he's been covering this stuff quite well. But long story short, that so the for me the gaming tie-in, of course, is if Nvidia is going to push these cards back, and obviously like so much of Nvidia's value right now as a stock price, whatever, it has gone from like, hey, it's the graphics card you need to mine fucking cryptocurrency, to like they made the shift right over to it's the graphics card you need to power all this AI shit, all this generative AI stuff that seemingly no one wants. And so what happens to Nvidia when, let's say when, but if, I suppose, that market actually takes a gigantic shit and the demand for Nvidia's stuff, like the Nvidia stock price is going to crash. Like, you hear reports all the time like, oh, longtime Nvidia people are getting the fuck out because they know it's a bubble, because they, a lot of stuff like that. So what happens to the graphics card market for people who just want to play video games what look nice? What happens to their competitors in AMD, when they get kind of caught up in the whirlwind of that? Would they be poised to strike and poised to take advantage of such a situation that, we could see a shift in the balance of power if Nvidia stumbles? Or would it just kind of take out the graphics card market in one fell swoop because people are like, oh, this sector's dead and blah, 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 blah. Like, will this horrific shell game, will the grift rip all this stuff up? Because, yeah, it's not like AMD has been doing awesome in the graphics card market. It's not like their graphics products have been, like, great. So if NVIDIA were... And the NVIDIA stuff is, like, I don't know. Look, I've got this 4090. It's real nice. It's a great video encoder. I was thinking, because I have some video servers here in the house that are serving video, that I was like, oh, it'd be nice if I had a card in those machines that could transcode AV1 if it needed to, or whatever. And I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to go buy another NVIDIA 40 series card like a crazy person. And I was like, oh, maybe those Intel cards, the ARC cards that they were selling, those have onboard AV1 video stuff. But then now Intel is also like shitting the bed big time with their latest CPUs having massive error problems, and they just laid off basically 1 trillion people. I don't know what the exact number is. It's fucking... I think it's more people than any company I've worked at has ever had. It is like an insane number of people that just got cut or will be cut this year. Tens, like, yeah, it's like 12,000, 15,000, somewhere in that vein. And so they are scaling back from a lot of their non-essential businesses. So the idea that Intel is going to continue to support these ARC cards or like make great strides in the graphics card market seems a little far-fetched as well. So yeah, I don't have a good answer to this other than, there have been rumors about Blackwell, about the 50 series cards eventually coming along, because these will still have GPU functionality. It's not just a case of like, hey, they're just going to make AI cards, but they're going to make cards that are better suited to go in machines specifically for AI as opposed to repurposing graphics cards. But they will still make graphics cards based on this technology. And there, I don't know, the rumors around it, of course, there were some people saying like, oh, maybe the 5090 is going to be out this year. The 5090 will be out by the end of 2024, but that's the only one they're going to ship, and the rest of the 50 series will come later. But now that they're saying that they're pushing this architecture back, that seems unlikely. I've seen things as, you know, like as you can just kind of Google it and click around, it doesn't really seem like anyone's got some like, here's the exact information. It's more just like, hey, we think this is how much RAM is going to, you know, this is the basic, how, you know, some of the specs of these cards are starting to fall into place. But as for availability, it might not be until 2026. And you're like, oh, okay. That's all right. I guess 4090s are still really expensive. Like they've become much more widely available. And of course, they've done the TI cards for the other cards in the 40 series line. I don't think you just need to get a 4090 or anything like that. But that is the only card in the line that I've tested. So I don't know. I don't know if people are satisfied with, you know, their 4070 Ti's and whatever else, or, you know, the 4080s, or, you know, some of the other cards that are out there. And then you go look at the Steam hardware survey and you see that like no one has these cards anyway. At the end of the day, no one, you know, like let's look it up right now. It's always a fun. It's been another month. Maybe they'll have they have July numbers here. So Windows 10 still running on 50% of all machines connecting to Steam. The 3060 is the leading card on Steam, but leading card means it's 5.71%. And below that is what? That's a 1650 with 3.8%. So it looks like the 30 series cards are mostly dominating. We don't see the 40 series show up until 1, 2, 3, 4. The number 5 on the list is a 4060 with 3.36%. And then there's a laptop 4060, not too much further down than that. We got a 4070 Ti down here in kind of the top 10 or 20. Radeon's Intel Iris Xe and Intel UHD graphics are all around the 1.5% to 2% range. Those cards don't get split out quite the same way. But we do see like Radeon RX 580 way down here on the list, and 4090 less than 1%. So, you know, no one is buying the highest of the high end anyway. So the idea of a 50 series card maybe not coming out until 2026, maybe that is the exact right time. Maybe that will be when people are jonesing for new graphics hardware in the first place, if anyone will be able to even afford it, if there are any jobs left by then. Then we will see. But yeah, you know, I have to imagine that if you're this probably all taps into, you know, some of the dissatisfaction with the current consoles to a certain degree as well. You know, just the idea that like people aren't necessarily needing to go buy the newest, latest. We've got news this week. In fact, as of just this morning, EA put a release date on the PS4 and Xbox One versions of Star Wars Jedi Survivor, a game that is over a year old now. And at some point they realized like, hey, we're leaving money on the table here with the scenario that we're in here as far as people that have upgraded versus not upgraded and everything else. Like, we should probably put this game that people seem to like when it runs well, which is not always, that we should put this out on previous generation consoles. So September 17th is the date for that. It's thanks to the strength of this legendary franchise and community demand, our development team has committed to bringing this Jedi experience to PS4 and Xbox One. That's from CEO Andrew Wilson on an earnings call, according to videogameschronicle.com. What a fucking weird generation that we're in. What the weirdest console generation I think I can even think of, because when did they announced that they were going to do this like a while ago. And you know, it still hasn't happened yet, but here we are, you know, like all this time later after the release of the other versions, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna bring it to PS4 because it'll probably sell better there. You know, the PS5 is not hard to, someone, a coder in chat is saying the PS5 is still hard to find. Maybe where you are, but I've, you know, anytime I go to any kind of big boxy kind of store, whether it's a Best Buy or a Target, I have not looked in the game section of a Walmart lately, but the stores I have been to in the area for a good long time have had no shortage of PS5s. I remember back around the holidays, it was right around the time that the slim PS5 was first hitting shelves. Best Buy just had a fucking mountain of the Spider-Man 2 bundle by checkout. They're just like, here, man, grab one. And and idiot me, I stopped and looked at it for a while and was like, maybe I should buy another PS5. Maybe I could get the slim PS5. It's smaller. That smaller PS5, that slim PS5, which is not that slim, will do adaptive charging for controllers with the latest beta firmware on PS5. Your launch edition PS5 can't do that. Suckers. I don't know. But yeah, the PS5 has not seemed hard to find for a pretty long time here. So, but yeah, they just the idea that they're, you know, that's the announcement today is like, hey, we got a release date for this Star Wars game that is like kind of old now. We are going to bring it to the old machines that people still have. It's like a smart business move, right? I mean, I can find no fault in this other than the part where like it's all like, I don't know, everything just seems like a weird nightmare right now. What's even going on? So like I was saying, I bought this Alienware monitor. I was looking for something to test it out with, and I fired up a couple of games. And I wanted to just kind of quickly mention here Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, which is out now. They added all of their wrestling stuff to it. So Cody Rhodes came out when they launched their recent season a couple of weeks ago. A week or two, yeah. Rhea Ripley was available for purchase, the WWE's own Rhea Ripley, but they have since added Rey Mysterio Jr. and Cody Rhodes. And they have also added a new mode that is, I believe it is called like Slam. Yeah, I think it's called Slam Deathmatch, if I'm remembering correctly. It is a new team deathmatch variant that is fucking rad. So it's team deathmatch, but when you shoot a player, they drop down into like a down but not out state, and if you leave them there, they can get back up and keep fighting. But what you have to do is you have to run over there and click in the right stick, which is how you do your finishers when you're playing Warzone or, you know, any of these other. And then it will just pick randomly one of the wrestling themed finishers that they have put into the game. And so, you know, you will see all of the characters in the game, not just the wrestler skins or whatever. You will see them hit Crossroads, which is Cody Rhodes' finishing move, or like, you know, these bulldogs, or just like fucking just murder somebody with a chair. And then they actually went and recorded VO of Michael Cole, the announcer for WWE. Just saying like shit that, you know, like maybe he would say more of it on TV these days with, you know, they've kind of loosened up a bit over there. But you know, he'll kind of narrate the finishers as they happen and just be like, that's a dead body right there. And it's just like, what the Michael Cole's talking about dead bodies. What the fuck's going on? It's one of the coolest, like, as far as like when they bring in Gundam or, you know, some of the other Attack on Titan, some of the other things that they've done over the years in Call of Duty to bring other brands in, and sometimes they'll try to build a mode around some of it. Like this, they did like all the Godzilla versus Kong stuff that was like kind kind of whatever. I think this is the best one of those they've ever done. Like the integration of like it feels authentic to the thing, right? Like you play it and you go like, oh, like that's cool. Like that's a cool use of wrestling. Like they've made a mode that plays to the strengths of wrestling in a bombastic way. They've added an announcer fucking losing his mind. Like they're playing into it in the exact right way. And I just wanted to acknowledge that like they did a fucking awesome thing. Like it's rare that those types of brand things are like well executed. It's more just like, here's, I don't know, here's Die Hard or here's The Boys, and you can, and we're doing a season mode for when The Boys skins debuted in the game. They just did a thing where it's like, you can fill this meter up, and if you're using The Boys skins, it fills up faster, and you'll win stickers that say Compound V on it or whatever the fuck it is. And it just, it didn't feel as big as this does. And so I don't know, good on them for doing like it's a fun mode. It's real silly. You become invincible for a very brief period of time when you execute the finishing move, so people can't shoot you out of it, which they can normally do in the other modes when you're using those moves. It's meant to be like a flashy risk versus reward kind of thing. But now it's just like, nah, man, just run up there and click in the stick and murder that motherfucker. And then you'll be invincible for a couple of seconds. So someone might be shooting at you, but you'll make it out okay, maybe. It's real goofy, but it's fun. It's fun. I have also, so I don't know that I have much to say about it. Vulgar the Viking 2 is coming out here pretty soon. I think it's later today, if not out already. I have been messing with that a little bit. It feels very much like I forgot how old Vulgar the Viking 1 was. But I guess it has been a long time since that game came out. It's neat to see another one. It's nice. But I need to spend some more time with it before I have anything of any real nuance to say there. Because I've been too busy playing Cooking Mama Sweet Shop on the 3DS. My daughter is obsessed with Cooking Mama Sweet Shop on the 3DS. She discovered it because it was installed on there and has been playing it. And there are it's a mini game collection. And they basically you pick a thing you want to make, like churros or whatever. And then it'll be like, okay, here are the 8 mini games you need to do well at in order to make churros. And so each dish will be a combination, like Cooking Mama be doing. But Cooking Mama Sweet Shop is a kind of condensed version of the full Cooking Mama experience, as I understand it anyway. And so a lot of this stuff is like weird rhythm games where you're shaking concentrated sugar, like powdered sugar, onto something, but you need to tap it in rhythm to a meter on the screen, but it doesn't line up to the music, so it's not a full rhythm game. It's like very frustrating at times where you're just like, there is a rhythm to this. You could have had music that played into this and it would have been a much more engaging game than what you made here. But like she knows her numbers just fine. But like there's one, and it's the simplest mini game where it's like you need to set an oven to a specific temperature and time and then hit go. And it shows you the temperature and time for like 10 seconds, and then you have to punch it in and hit go, and that's it. And it's been interesting because she like is just like doesn't know what to do there. And I'm like, okay. So it's been fun showing her and be like, okay, so we're setting it to 180 degrees. Now, what's 180? 180 are the numbers that make up 180. And then now we do it for 15 minutes, and we hit this button, and so that's been that was the first one that she had trouble with. But then they had me, dude. Cooking Mama Sweet Shop sucks. Some of these mini games are absolute bullshit. Like I'm flinging mango cubes into these jars full of liquid. And so it's a lot of touchscreen stuff, and it's a lot of stuff that has to happen at a speed that the touchscreen is not up to doing. And so I'm trying to put these mango cubes into these jars, but like some of them only want 2 cubes, and you're like, okay, flip, there you go. And then some of them come in and they want 5, but it's like it's not there long enough for you to put fucking 5 in it. I get 3 in there and then it pulls it away. I'm like, well, fuck you. Fuck these mango pudding juice, whatever the hell I'm making. It's a bunch of real silly mini games. You have to tilt the 3DS at one point because you're carrying a pudding over to the fridge to set, and it's constantly going like this, and so you're kind of, so I have, she plays most of it, but she'll just run into some of these things and bring it to me and be like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, okay, in this one you need to draw a circle over and over again to stir this pot, or to like spray whipped cream onto the top of a pastry or whatever it is. And I'm just finding that like the motions it wants me to do are very unclear, because it just draws a circle and I'm like, okay, I'll draw a circle, and then it'll just go wow 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 like you did it wrong. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, it is really frustrating. It's really like we're having a fun time with it. Like, I'm having fun helping her play it, but at the same time, it's very frustrating to play it and go like, this is not a great game. Like, like some of the motion stuff, some of the touchscreen stuff they want you to do here is shitty. It's like poorly made. You just go like, she deserves better than this bullshit. I'm like, oh, God damn it. But also not really. She's loving it. So whatever. That's kind of all that matters. But yes, there's been a lot of Cooking Mama Sweet Shop being played in the house lately. All right, why don't we get into the rest of the news? Game Informer, longtime magazine, started in the 90s, 33 years ago. Game Informer was shut down earlier this week by its parent company, GameStop, which still exists somehow. Or I guess that was Friday. I guess that was technically last week. So this was done very unceremoniously. This was done where, people got informed, and then the entire website got shut off. Any story, any article, anything you might want to look for was replaced by this like shoddily written farewell message that didn't come from anyone on the actual team. And then someone from the team who still had access to the Twitter account wrote something, nice, very innocuous, just saying like, hey, here are the people that did this, and here are the people that used to work on this magazine, and hey, we'll see ya. And then the parent company decided to seemingly delete the Twitter account, which makes, on a corporate level, makes a ton of sense. On a human level, is fucking dog shit. It's a fucking terrible way to treat people. The knee-jerk reaction there is like, they could post something bad about the corporation, we have to pull the plug right away. But the, whatever. I guess the lesson here is you should know better than to expect humanity out of GameStop, a company that has been, just feels like it's been circling the drain. Like it's a joke, right? GameStop is like a punchline. It's like a stock price punchline now. It's not a vital part of much of anything these days, unless you're trying to fucking buy Funko Pops. So at the end of the day, and, having known a number of people who have written for Game Informer over the years and talked to them what it was like when GameStop came in. And so to back up a little bit, Game Informer was originally the magazine of Funcoland, which you may not remember. That's Funco. Funcoland was a video game retailer that they didn't have a huge West Coast presence. There was one near me that I don't think I ever went there. There was, it wasn't in the good mall, it was in the dirt mall in Santa Rosa, Cottingtown. And Game Informer was their magazine. And so, like, the early days of Game Informer, like, it looked like a pamphlet. It was like a big chunk of it was devoted to, here are the prices we are buying and selling used games for, you know? And so I remember, I think a friend of mine, when I was like 15 or so, went to Funcoland and came back with a copy of Game Informer and showed it to me. And I had never seen it before, you know, like because it wasn't, I don't think they were on newsstands at the time. I think it was something that maybe you could only get from Funcoland. But like those early issues are, you know, it's barely a magazine at that point. You know, it really is just something that's like, hey, there's a little bit of editorial in here, and we hired these guys that worked in the warehouse or, you know, to write about games, and here's the price list for everything else. And so you'd open it up, and, you know, I distinctly remember seeing that issue and looking at it and going, what even is this? And seeing, like, on the first page, like, who do they have reviewing games? And you look at it and you go, Andy the Game Dandy. You're like, what? At age 15, that was very funny. You know, it was only 1 or 2 years later that I found myself hanging out in Las Vegas with Andy McNamara, who would later change his name to Andy the Game Hombre. And Paul and I guess Rick and Ross, not Rick Ross, but yes, the original 4 reviewers that they had. And that magazine grew and grew. You know, they eventually Funcoland got bought out, and then, you know, eventually they just became a part of GameStop. But even before that, like, the magazine changed and became a much more serious publication, and just like, I had just much more editorial content in it. You know, it was really only those first handful of issues, maybe for like the first year or whatever it was. You'd have to go back and look at the archives. I'm sure that those are out there if you want them, but at some point, it's like, okay, now it's got like full on covers. It doesn't look like it doesn't look like a pamphlet. The paper stock has gotten much better. The covers look good. It's, you know, like they grew and became a real market force, man, to the point where, because of their inroads that they had in gaming retail, partially because of those, but, you know, they very quickly became the most read. I mean, they were like the number 3 largest magazine in all of the United States, circulation wise, for a while there. I think that was the number that was tossed around a lot over the years. And you know, some of that circulation was newsstand and subscriptions, but a lot of it was I think newsstand, but a lot of it was like, hey, you know, you came in the store, you got a subscription, you got this, or, you know, and so they were able to overtake what we thought of as like the biggest magazines of the day. Because, like, you know, it was like EGM was big, but the talk was always that Game Pro was bigger, and that the Game Pro was maybe more kid based. I didn't really keep huge tabs on what the circulation numbers of print magazines of the 90s were, but like that's how I remember it going. And then Game Informer just blowing up and becoming massive. And so as a result, Game Informer was able to, like, they were the go-to. If you had a game and you were getting ready, in the US anyway, if you had a game and you were getting ready to announce a video game, you wanted to get your game on the cover of Game Informer, because that would get it seen by more people than if it was on the cover of EGM or if it was on the cover of Game Pro or any of the other stuff that was out there. And so as a result, they had a run of just incredible exclusives on the cover of that magazine. They never, you know, they obviously, you know, the world changed on them a bunch, but, you know, they eventually did start a website, but in a lot of ways, until maybe more recently, And by more recently, I think I mean like the last decade or so. So maybe not that recent, but like there was a long time, and I think they ran into it maybe more so than even the Ziff books did. But like Game Informer, I think, had a hard time figuring out the internet and what that was going to do to the magazine, or you know, like how were they going to adapt, how were they going to take advantage of online, and how that was going to work in conjunction with them having a print magazine. And so for the longest time there, you would be on the Gaming Age forums, and subscribers would get their Game Informer magazines, and people would just scan them and put the screenshots on Gaming Age, and that was that. And so I remember if it was Andy or just like, you know, like the people of Game Informer getting online and being like, hey, could you not? I mean, like we worked really hard on this fucking magazine. Like, for you guys to just like scan these exclusives and just throw them online. But, you know, at the end of the day, like that's the reality that they were facing, you know, the idea that something was just going to live inside of a magazine and not get out there onto the internet at large. And so like they stayed very focused on the magazine because that was their bread and butter, and because they were in stores and they were, you know, they had all of this other stuff that, you know, was really their focus. And so I don't know, like for as much as they would hire video editors and build video teams, and, you know, like it seemed like they were oftentimes like late to the party on some of the video stuff that happened online. They eventually got there. But like it, you know, like they were very protective of the print magazine. And I think Ziff went through something similar with, you know, so today is an interesting day to talk about all of this specific stuff because of the other game, you know, media story we'll talk about in a minute here. But like, so for a while there, Ziff Davis and ZDNet were one thing, and GameSpot, which I was working for at the time, got bought by Ziff Davis. And so suddenly we were owned by the company that published EGM. And so it was like this thing of like, okay, figure out what that means. And we were publishing news all day long. We were publishing reviews every 3 days a week or something that we had to be limited to just for technical reasons back then. But we were the internet. We were the internet first. We were only on the internet. There was no print magazine. We didn't give a shit. Like we were getting the information, putting it up. Like we were doing everything as fast as we could while trying to be as accurate as we could with the information. And so the idea of these monthly print magazines that were still, you know, a big deal to some people, and trying to figure out what that meant. Like for the longest time, that meant we were running a website for EGM. That if you went to it, it was a page that said, here's what's in this month's issue. Click here to subscribe. And that's it. And so they would have stuff in the magazine that, you know, was exclusive to them that wasn't on the internet yet. And the EGM would run into the same thing that, you know, not to the, I don't think to the extreme that Game Informer did, because I think Game Informer was just bigger and, you know, they just had bigger exclusives more frequently than EGM did. But it was the same type thing of just like, here's the review scores from this month's EGM, and here's some screenshots that they got exclusively, and we've scanned them and put them online, and there you go. You don't need to go buy EGM anymore. And that's what people were doing online. And so I think we were just like, hey, why don't we just put EGM's content online, and so at least they're coming to us for it, and they can get it, you know, not a shitty scan, not a shitty fucking photo of a page or whatever. But of course, the response to that is like, oh, who would buy the magazine if we did that? And it's like, okay, well, this is going to happen one way or the other, dog. Like, I don't know what you think this, I don't know how you think this is going to go. It's not like the internet's just going to go away. And like, even if there was no official business, these message boards, it's not like they're just going to stop doing it. So what's the plan? How do we adapt to this? What, you know, and they didn't for a long time. None of the print magazines wanted to do that. And EGM was a real, you know, that was the one I kind of had a front row seat for in some ways, for at least for a while there. And so it would get to a point where like a couple of weeks in after the subscriber copies had hit, we would put some articles up, And they were trying to do things where it'd be like, oh, well, this is in the magazine, but there's a larger version of the story online, or whatever. And I don't know, none of that really attracted a ton of interest. And then we got sold off, and like we split up again. And so ZDNet, which was the internet side of things, got bought by CNET. And so we went off and became CNET. The print magazines were again their own thing. I've told the story before, but as a part of that merger, we got control of the domain videogames.com. And so that became, they renamed the console coverage from Video Game Spot to videogames.com. And I remember hearing a story like not long after the split that like those guys were like, hey, can we have videogames.com back? To which the answer was like, fuck no. Absolutely not. What the fuck are you talking about? And that's why they started 1UP. Or that's why they called it 1UP, is because they could not call it videogames.com. And so they ended up building 1UP. And even then it was like what is 1UP? If you're not willing to sacrifice the magazines, or at least like if you're not willing to do the thing a website can do, then what are you doing? And they struggled with that for a while. They eventually hit a good rhythm with it, I think. And they leaned into the whole thing of like, hey, we're going to have exclusives in the print magazine, and then the expanded story online, and Game Informer eventually I think leaned into the same thing. Yeah. It's what happened to Game Informer fucking sucks. And specifically in the way that it went down. That, they basically on a Friday, they had a meeting with the GameStop's HR person who just said like, all right, that's it. We'll figure out severance packages for you, but we're shutting it down immediately. And then it was all gone. No, like, hey, we're going to leave this website up. Like, okay, so they were in the middle of a cycle of like, they had just gotten the exclusive on the new Dragon Age. So they were just going to have a bunch of new Dragon Age stuff on their website. Like you can go find the tweets of the Dragon Age account pointing to Game Informer's Twitter account, which no longer exists. And it's just fucking gone. Like imagine if you're in BioWare's shoes of just like, oh, well, fuck, what? I mean, whatever. That's the least, a bunch of people lost their job. So BioWare not being able to promote their fucking game, whatever, they'll put it up on their website or something. None of this is surprising. I don't think anyone who I would be shocked if anyone who worked at that publication at any time over the last 10 or 15 years, because like, what, GameStop bought in like 2000, maybe a little bit later than that. Yes, according to IGN's article on it, yes, GameStop bought Funcoland in 2000. And in 2011 is when Game Informer was the third largest magazine in the US. Yeah, so no one, I don't think so. But like when I talk again, these aren't necessarily my stories to tell, and I'm sure that the people involved in them will have plenty to say about this if they haven't said it already. But like, at the end of the day, no one thought that GameStop was going to take care of this publication. I think people that had to deal with a GameStop corporate during their time at Game Informer realized that like, oh, this company does not give a shit about us at all. And so in some ways, the surprise is that they made it as long as they did. Because yeah, I don't think like it's one of those weird. Well, I don't know. You want to say it was writing on the wall, but like that's this thing. If you write on that wall enough times over the years, eventually it will be right? Especially when it comes to shutting down a publication that writes about video games. I don't think we're done on that front. either. But yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. I think that the people of Game Informer obviously deserved way better. The publication is legendary in the space. And so the idea that that literally they just pulled the plug and shut the website down. Like, hey, want to find a link to an article that you liked from a long time ago? Too fucking bad. If you like anything on their YouTube channel, better get it soon. I can't imagine that's going to stay there. And I'm betting some part of that is like, oh, they looked at cost cutting and, like GameStop's not doing great. No one's sitting there going like, the company's in amazing shape. Like the dude's being fucking investigated, isn't he? Like the company has become a joke. They went from Funcoland to Funcoland. Because now all they fucking sell is Funko Pops. Get it? This is because it's a it's terrible. Again, it's a publication that has had like legendary. I still remember someone. I literally don't know who this person is, but someone had access to PDFs of the Game Informer pages about Titanfall 1. And they sent them to me a few days before the subscriber copies went out. So it was like the game had not been announced. Everyone was just like, what is this company working on? What is this? All these ex Call of Duty developers, what are they making? We know we're going to find out real soon. We know we're going to find out at E3 what they're working on. And then like the day before I drove down, and it was like the morning of or something. I remember sitting in the office and I remember seeing it come in on the drive down and not being able to look at it, and then pulling my laptop out in the parking lot of the hotel and getting on the Wi-Fi and all this other fucking shit and loading it up and being like, oh my fucking God. Like, what the fuck is this? Like seeing like the first images of Titanfall and realizing like, oh, Game Informer is going to be publishing this in like 2 days or whatever. And it was just like, that was an interesting one. Because I think they send those pages to the people at the studio. And I don't know how widely spread they get around that, but I think they may have, at that time anyway, been giving heads up. Like, hey, here's what your cover story looks like or whatever. Because it was literally just the pages about Titanfall. Yeah, it's we're recording Game Boys to Men this week, and we've been talking about we won't do it for this one, but like I want to, Andy McNamara is a big part of our story. Mine anyway, Glenn's as well to a certain extent, but like Andy and Paul, who is sadly no longer with us, were like basically they were in the first 3 or 4 people that I had met through the video game industry. Like met him at CES and we hung out and we were going to parties and stuff, and they were they were older. I think they were over 21. And well, yes. In fact, they were over 21 and we were definitely not. How about that? And I was like 16 at the time. And some of the first conversations I had with people in the video game industry were with Andy and Paul. And so yeah, I don't know, man. Game Informer has always just like been at the center of a lot of things. Ryan McDonald, who worked with us at GameSpot for a couple of years there, was the Game Informer West Coast editor. And he was always running around with his fucking video camera, filming stuff for the magazine and, whatever else. And so they would send him to events that happened out on the West Coast because they were based in Minnesota. It's probably the reason they made it as long as they did is because they were based in Minnesota at a time when everything was just getting more and more expensive. They could, and I'm sure salaries probably reflected the cost of living in Minnesota in a lot of ways as well, as opposed to some of those West Coast salaries and New York salaries and all that other stuff. Yeah, it's frustrating. You know, there was a team in place there that, you know, have been doing solid work for some time as well, like even more recently, you know. And yeah, I'm real sad about it. I'm like more so than I thought I would be for something that, like, when it happened, my first reaction was like, well, yeah, that's kind of, I guess, yeah, that was going to happen at some point here. There's no reason to believe that GameStop was, you know, I'm not even convinced that GameStop itself will survive. Not that they're going to go under this year or something, but like the need for GameStop is you know, and GameStop, what they do is a store. Like when you walk into a fucking GameStop now, you don't want anything in there. Maybe you do. Maybe you're just like, I need a backpack that's got Princess Peach on it, or, you know, whatever. Whatever fucking horseshit they fucking sell. I think the last thing I bought at a GameStop was a copy of WarioWare Gold for the 3DS. And I remember walking in there and being like, what the fuck is this store? Do you even have fucking video games in here anymore? Or what is this shit? But at the end of the day, those people deserve better. MinMax, who, you know, the Ben Hansen and all them, you know, they kind of grew out of Game Informer. It sounds like MinMax is going to be doing a lot of coverage, and they're going to be spending some significant time talking about Game Informer and its legacy and all of that stuff. So, you know, I'm sure that they're probably in the best position to do that type of retrospective work about GI. So do give them a look if you're looking for more stuff along those lines. Not explicitly game related, but on the media side of things, CNET has been sold yet again. This time to Ziff Davis, the company that owns IGN. You may remember CNET was most recently purchased by a company called Red Ventures back in 2020. Was it early 21? I believe I don't know what other websites are part of this. If this is because ZDNet is also still a website, and I don't know if ZDNet was also purchased and is now owned by Ziff Davis, if the ZDNet and Ziff Davis brands have come back under one roof or not, or if this is literally they just bought CNET.com and the staff that works for that. I don't have the answer to that. The reporting has not broken it down. Talk was that Red Ventures bought everything for, what was it, like $500 million? And now they're selling CNET off for somewhere around $100 million. It's hard to imagine a world where this is worse for the people of CNET than what they were doing before. So I don't, you know, so we'll kind of see what ends up happening there. Like I said, it's not explicitly game related, but CNET as a brand, you know, as a tech brand, probably fits into the Ziff Davis portfolio pretty well with the batch of stuff that it owns. And, you know, and they already peeled off all the gaming properties, like all the gaming websites that were part of that group got sold a while ago to Fandom. You know, the company that's so popular that someone made a browser extension explicitly to block them from search results, because everyone likes Fandom. And they're wonderful wiki sites. Yuck. So anyway, I don't know. CNET's over there now, and like I said, man, I was there when CNET bought ZDNet, and not the print magazines. And so now Ziff Davis, or whatever is Ziff Davis now, it was a company called J2 Global. And J2 Global owned the Ziff Davis brand, and they owned IGN and all this other stuff. And so J2 at some point in 2021 rebranded themselves as Ziff Davis. Because why wouldn't you? Ziff Davis as a brand has been around for like 100 years or more at this point. And so just, I don't know, the idea of all these years later, because it was the 90s, man. It was like the late 90s or something like that. That was when CNET bought us. And we became part of CNET, and they eventually shut down CNET Game Center in favor of keeping GameSpot around, which was, I mean, you know, a lot of people lost their jobs, and that's terrible. But at the same time, like, we were all under the assumption that we were fucked. It was like, oh, they bought us, but like they already have a game website. What are we going to do? And they ended up shutting that one down, which GameSpot was significantly larger than Game Center at the time. So, I guess, you know, I would have done the same thing, I suppose. In that, we ended up hiring some of the Game Center people, a couple of people that were at Game Center. We brought over to our side of things not long after that. And yeah, man, it's just it's a messy fucking business. CNET has been, you know, catching some shit over the past couple of years for AI written articles that they kind of didn't back down from. When they got called out on it, they were like, yeah, well, yeah. And so you know, we'll see what happens with that stuff. I know CNET did a redesign that, you know, they redesigned their logo and redesigned the whole website. I heard that fucking destroyed the site's SEO and like ruined their traffic and all, you know, like, so I heard that redesign was a fucking disaster. So, you know, maybe they end up putting it back together. It's weird. I don't know what I would do. Like, dude, CNET, right? What like tech reviews and like what, so much of that has been consumed by smaller blogs and more nimble and newer and flashier publications and people, just individuals now. That like the idea of a website that's like, we're just going to cover all of tech. Like, what does that mean? This refrigerator is sick. Also, this car is sick. Also, these phones are sick. You know, just like that website's been around for that website's been around for, I believe, something like 30 years or something like that now. And yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's the gaming brands, like a lot of that stuff just feels real old. It's cool that stuff still exists, and you know, there is a legacy there. But yeah, exactly. Steel Knight in chat says, didn't people like Marcus Brownlee steal their lunch? Like, probably to a certain extent. I mean, CNET still did fine for a lot of years. And CNET is still a strong brand. I do think that there's something there, but it's like there's just a certain amount of like, what do you do with it? I had a lot of ideas about that sort of stuff, but they were always anyway. Not my problem, man. No, I don't know. There's good people there. There's the guy who recently, I believe, came back to run that organization. I would work for that guy again. He's good people. Like, he is of people I have worked for in different corporate structures and stuff. That dude's a good guy. And I wonder if he is gonna stay. Anyway, whatever. This is of interest to about 12 people now. So yes, so that happened, and good for this again. Hopefully, this means good things for the people of CNET. But of course, the last time CNET got sold, I think a lot of us were like, well, this couldn't have been any worse than what they had us doing. What else is going on? It's just been fucking brutal, man. Bungie laid off 220 people. That brings them, according to Bloomberg, from around 1,300 employees to around 850. And the Bungie cuts are deep. And like I to an extent where I'm not sure what Bungie is now. Like obviously they you know, Destiny had its big kind of blow off. They had its big blow off pay-per-view. No, it had its big kind of final big expansion, right? And people liked it. And they said like, okay, we're changing, you know, we're going to go to a smaller, more frequent model of updates, and you know, we're going to kind of do this thing. And I think people were tentatively like, all right, let's see what this is. Which makes sense. That game, Destiny 2, is old at this point. This is meant to be this was the thing that was supposed to be the end of their narrative for a big long time, or the end of major narrative for them. And then they were also working on Marathon. They had another. They've had like mobile projects in the works over the years. I don't know. They had a partner for one of those. I don't know if it was neGcon or Tencent but there was some. There was some product. There was some mobile thing that they were working on in partnership with someone. And I don't know if that thing is still a going concern or if that's been completely killed or what. But you know, the big things obviously are Destiny 2 and Marathon. The cuts they made are like it's a lot of people at a lot of different levels. Like it's senior people. It's the people that you would expect to be there to make sure Marathon is finished and does well. So it's like a deep level of cuts for even their upcoming project that makes me like sit back and go like, what the fuck? Like if you're gonna back out of Destiny because you kind of reached the crescendo of its story, and you're like, okay, we don't need the senior people that run Destiny anymore because we're moving to this more of a maintenance model or you know, whatever you want to call it. I could see making you could justify to me why you would want fewer people on that project. But like the cuts to Marathon seem fucking wild to me. This also marks the end of a Destiny kind of side project that was operating under the name Payback. And it sounds like that, you know, amongst the senior leadership that were cut, you know, Luke Smith, you know, who I've spoken with on the internet in the past, of course. Speaking of Ziff Davis. Along with Mark Noseworthy, it sounds like that they are both out as a result of this. And like again, people that like I put it to you this way, I don't think I know anybody who works at Bungie anymore. But yeah, some folks, you know, Sony was able to absorb some of these because they're starting a new team, and so there's kind of a new team that is a new studio, I guess, that is spinning up, that some folks that were former Bungie are going to end up at in some form. And they were looking for positions around Sony for some of these folks as well. And then a lot of them are just kind of getting cut. So it does sound like Sony did try to do some kind of relocation for some of these folks. But this is a again, there's a depth to these cuts, and it's touching, like, you're hearing, I'm seeing people say, like, oh, my entire team is gone, to just, like, senior level people that you're like, oh, I would have thought that these would be the, they're more expensive, but, like, I would think that these would be the kind of, like, visionary types that you would hang on to, or, it's fucking weird. It's not that, actually, look, weird is maybe not the word, but it does not fill me with, like, a great deal of hope for, like, what the fuck is going to happen with Marathon. Because Marathon was a very interesting looking trailer, and the idea of getting an extraction shooter over in a mainstream way seemed difficult to me. That seemed like, I would love to see them do it because I have faith in the teams at Bungie to figure that out. And now I'm like, I don't know. There has been a lot of lashing out at Pete Parsons, who has been running Bungie for a while now. I have seen, like, it's a lot of, there have been a lot of articles, kind of people summing up quotes of ex Bungie employees talking shit about Pete Parsons. And I'll say I've seen a lot of people who are maybe not chiming in directly, liking a lot of posts on LinkedIn and other platforms that are people that they used to work with talking shit about Pete Parsons. So that seems like people are lining up to fucking point fingers at that guy. This is the guy who, back when Sony announced the acquisition of Bungie back in January of 2022, said, and I quote, "With Sony's support, the most immediate change you will see is an acceleration in hiring talent across the entire studio to support our ambitious vision. If this speaks to you and you want to help us put a dent in the universe, we are hiring across all disciplines for Destiny 2 and for all new worlds beyond." So that they did. They hired up. Is it a case of a lot of the pandemic scale not working out post-pandemic? This seems, because this is January 2022. This is when you should have seen more writing on more walls about scaling up and what that means. But I guess everyone kind of walked into some walls here probably along the way, right? Like, they probably didn't expect the last Destiny update, probably like a Lightfall, to be as negatively received as it was. We heard reports around the last number of layoffs that they did, that they're like, oh, Destiny numbers, they missed their target by like 40% or whatever it was. Players are not happy. This thing is on fire. And they delayed the final shape, which just came out a couple of months ago here. But was well received, and longtime Destiny players seemed to enjoy it. We were seeing reports of Bungie being viewed as like, okay, like, because remember, Sony also said, hey, we've got an aggressive plan. We want to have like 12 live service games in the market, and we've got those in development, and we've got those in various forms of, like that's happening. That hasn't necessarily materialized probably as quickly as Sony expected it would, for a variety of reasons. I know that, some, obviously the Last of Us multiplayer thing, they took a step back from that and canned that. Conquered is still coming, but at the same time, Conquered is going out of its way to talk about how they are not doing a battle pass, and they're not doing this, and they're not doing that. And, yes, it's a live service game because they're talking about the post-launch updates that they want to do. And so they're probably counting that as a live service game, but it's not, it doesn't really feel like it's one in the traditional sense, in terms of, here's this free-to-play thing that we're going to sell all this shit to you on, which that's a good thing, but or is it? We'll see. That game's not that far off. And so, and of course, obviously Jim Ryan is gone. And so we've had a turnover at the top of Sony. And, Herman Hulst has a kind of firmer hand on some of those wheels, and Hiroki Totoki obviously is a threat. And he, and he seemed to come in on that kind of interim basis and be like, okay, we've got to clean up this business. Like, there's a lot of potential here, but we're wasting a lot of money here, and here. And so, you wonder if like that just they walked into a belt tightening era that they were not expecting to see. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay. Because there's a lot of, there's been some additional reporting here saying, and I believe some of this is speculation. That this round of layoffs at Bungie was something that was planned. That basically this would have happened regardless of how well or not well the final shape did, because the studio was already operating in such a way that it's like, okay, this is not going to remain. We can't keep going like this. The economics of this are way, way, way upside down, and so the speculation that these cuts were going to happen one way or the other. I think if you're a guy in Pete Parsons' shoes and you know this stuff is coming, I don't think I would do things like invite people over to look at my expensive classic cars that I've been buying. There was someone who was part of the cuts. Basically, it was like, yeah, like 2 days before the layoffs were announced, Pete invited me over to see like his $2 million worth of cars he just purchased. You don't need to do that. The actions and we saw like Jim Ryan in the like going away party photos right before all those Sony layoffs were announced and everything else. Those org charts are already drawn up. They know what's happening. They know basically what's coming. Like the idea, like the ability for people at that level to just act like nothing is going wrong right up until the announcement is made. Like, you could just pull back a little bit, just 10% of just like, oh, well, maybe in a few weeks we could do this. At least, yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, there's no right way to lay people off, but there are ways that are more right and more wrong. You know what I mean? When it comes to tact, when it comes to being a person, when it comes to acting like a human in these situations. But public companies, yeah, I don't know. It's a fucking mess, man. It's a fucking mess. Yeah, so Video Games Chronicle collected some of the people talking shit about Pete Parsons. Former community manager Liana Ruppert says, "You are a liar, a thief, and so many things we can't discuss publicly. Step down, and without the giant Sony payout, this isn't on Sony. This is squarely on the failure of leadership, plain and simple." That's kind of been another running theme, is that, it's not necessarily like, it's not people going like, well, because we got bought by Sony, this happened. It's more like, no, this was a incredibly poorly run studio. Like, our burn rate was fucking out of control. Like, there were things that could have been reined in a long time ago that just weren't. And that's a failure on leadership, is what a lot of these people are asserting. Bungie, they sold the company, right? I mean, they did it before and managed to like skin the cat and get unsold and go independent again under Microsoft. And that was an astounding feat. But it's I don't know. Like it's hard for me to imagine Bungie making it another 10, 5 maybe. I don't know. Like, we'll see what Marathon. How does Marathon ship? If they didn't think Marathon was going to ship, they would have shut the entire studio down. So I guess So I guess there is at least some confidence in that bet, or the amount of money that has already been spent on Marathon development. And we'll see what they end up doing. There's a lot of retooling you could do to Destiny 2 in terms of like, if you wanted to like prep it for free to play, if you wanted to mix it up that way and put it in more of a maintenance mode or whatever. But like, Higher Noobs in the chat says there won't be another Destiny if Marathon doesn't succeed. Yeah, I agree. But also, I don't know that Marathon... Okay, even if Marathon does succeed, I don't know that there would be another Destiny at this point. The project that got shut down was said to be a third-person game. It's really weird to hear it described as like, it was a third-person game, and some of the cues, they were taking cues from Genshin Impact and Warframe. It's very weird to hear like this idea of like, yeah, we kind of wanted to make a different game in the Destiny universe, and also it's like Warframe, the game that Destiny is most often compared to. You're like, oh, huh. Which sounds like, it sounds to me like, hey, they were going to make a Destiny game where you buy Titan. Yeah, I'm going to buy a new Titan. I'm going to get Zavala. I'm going to get this. I'm going to, like whatever it is. And each one's going to have their different moves. And I got a 5-star Zavala motherfucker, or whatever it is. Much like The Last Descendant. The first. Let me look at my Steam list here. Is the first Descendant. Which is also a Warframe in a lot of those ways. Marathon, that trailer had an amazing visual style, had an amazing visual identity, and it seems like most of the people that crafted that identity are not with the studio anymore. One of the coolest things that Destiny 2 did was have a bunch of fucking new art every year or so, whether it was player decals or, just like sick fucking logos and just like cool aesthetics, and like, here's a new area and it looks fucking amazing. And I don't, whatever. I don't know how to make games at all. At the end of the day, I'm not a game developer. And so, there's that. But like at the same time, I wonder what all of this ends up becoming in the end. Like what does Marathon end up becoming? And if Marathon is not an immediate success, how much rope do they have to fucking make it right? Like, it seems like a real pressure situation with now like way fewer people at your side to help get the fucking job done. And that's got to be nerve-wracking for sure for the people who are still there. I'm sure they're not like doing their best work right now, going through all of this shit either. So it's sad. It's sad to see. I didn't quite buy into the legend of Bungie to the extent that a lot of other people do. I think it was when Destiny 1 was getting ready to launch. There was something in there where they were like, well, we invented the console shooters, so I think we know a thing or two about. And I just want to be like, no, you fucking didn't. At least not no. No, you did not. But like Bungie's view of Bungie was always a little hard for me to buy into. But at the same time, I do think that Bungie is a pretty legendary developer, even if you push some of that rhetoric and some of that stuff to the side. The things they made, the Halos they made, the things, getting out of Microsoft and making Destiny and getting out of Activision and getting away from that fucking horse shit, that tire fire and being able to go independent. And like Bungie has had this like fucking charmed life as a studio for a really long time. And that feels gone now. That feels like, you used it up. You walked into a brick wall, whether it's like, hey, you sold to Sony at the exact wrong time, but also if you didn't sell to Sony, would Bungie continue to exist at all? The word is probably not. They were not in a position where not selling was the move. So they were going to have to sell it to somebody. Sony certainly would have seemed like the right place at the time. But then Sony went through everything Sony's gone through in terms of some of the studio closures there and, the change in leadership and everything else. And, so I imagine that when you let go a bunch of your senior people, that means that Sony is going to be taking a firmer hand on the studio going forward, which, is natural. Like, that's, of course, right? I mean, that was kind of always going to happen. Company cultures are slow to change after an acquisition because everyone wants to hold on to what made the magic. But look, sometimes those people retire. Sometimes they all get laid off. And, some people have posited that maybe Sony overpaid for Bungie and that maybe Bungie overpromised what they were capable of, or the Bungie leadership maybe did. And so that everyone kind of walked into that brick wall together or something. But like, whatever. I'm sure there's a book to be written down the line about some of that shit. But like the part that's easy to see now is like this is just fucking bad, man. This is just like in the grand scheme of things, but also in the more narrow focused, like, let's see what happens with Marathon. I was very interested in seeing what the future of Destiny may be. And I obviously feel for the people that have lost their jobs. I also feel for the people who didn't, because now they're in this weird pressure situation that was already a pressure situation because of it's just stacking up all these double or nothing bets until at some point the whole thing's gone or they get it all back. Right. I don't know, man. It's a very depressing situation. According to the Financial Times, by way of videogameschronicle.com, Warner Brothers Discovery is once again considering selling some part of its video game business, but this is a little bit different than it was last time. This seems to be that they are looking to sell a stake in the studios. They're not looking to sell them off completely. Apparently, they are also considering offers for the Polish broadcaster TVN, which they also own. That's... I don't know who you get to buy part of Warner's game business, and do you sell it to an existing game studio? So it's like, would you start like a joint venture almost, or like would you say, hey, do you want to own half of Warner's game business? We own the other half. I don't know what that ends up looking like just structurally, but maybe you sell it to another game studio who can run the studios, right? They can run the studios, and Warner can just like say, hey, we own the IP, and that's why we own half of this, or whatever. If they end up selling to like an EA or something, it's like, okay, all these studios are now technically EA studios, and they report in through all of that stuff because they know how to do video games, and what does Warner Brothers know how to do? Smear shit all over itself over and over again. Apparently, I don't know. Like, I feel like especially once you get out of just video games, actually specifically when you stop thinking about Warner Brothers as just video games, it feels like that company is just like, there's some article about this company every couple of weeks that you're just like, oh, they did it again. They really have no idea what they're doing over there, do they? Like, and at some point, like, you wonder, like, do people have it out for Warner Brothers, or is it really that bad? It seems like a mixture of the two. They've been a real punching bag for a lot of stuff, but also they've made a bunch of terrible decisions. So, a real chicken and egg problem on where the blame belongs. In the mix along all of this, of course, is the underperformance of Suicide Squad. With the report being that game that basically Warner lost $200 million on Suicide Squad, which is a lot of money. They also just purchased Player First Games, which is the studio responsible for the development of Multiverses, which seems like a relatively small team. You know, they were already being assisted. They're down in San Diego. They were already being assisted by Warner's San Diego studio, and so now they just kind of made that one thing, I guess. But like, okay, so you've got your Harry Potter stuff, which presumably they'll make more of that bullshit because it does real well for them. You've got all the DC Comics stuff, which lately has just been Suicide Squad and I guess Gotham Knights before that. I wonder, Gotham Knights didn't. Well, I don't think Gotham Knights was an especially good game, but I don't know what the eventual, like, where that fell financially. And then there's that Wonder Woman game is supposed to still be in development at Monolith, right? I mean, they were hiring for that at some point. And then of course NetherRealm, the Mortal Kombat team, who just lost their mobile developers, and they're shutting down that mobile game. But it sounds like that they laid off most, if not all, of their mobile people. And like, yeah, so yeah, they also own TT Games, the Traveler's Tales, the Lego folks. And Rocksteady still exists. I mean, at some point they will be free and clear of Suicide Squad, and they will start to ideate on another project, I would assume, if they're not already. I would like to think they're already like, okay, what are we doing next? Like, okay, there's a bunch of people over here that have to finish up the Suicide Squad support stuff and whatever content we have to deliver there. What are we doing? Is it Batman? Do we have to do a new Batman? Are we stuck doing Batman again? I think that's the wrong move. I don't think that, like, if Rocksteady just said like, hey, our next game is a return to form and Batman is back, and I don't know that the excitement would be there the way it needs to be. I could be wrong there, but I and you probably do a different slice of the Batman universe. You probably just don't go. If they were to return to Batman, I don't think that they would just be like, here's the next Arkham game. I think they would be like, here's the new Batman game, and it's got a totally different look because it's based on the animated series, or it's based on whatever, right? Like they've taken a different corner of the universe and turned that into a game. Like maybe they end up doing that. If they have to return to Batman, I think that's probably the only way they could like make that work. And obviously they've had a little bit of brain drain there because some of the heads of that studio left and started a new studio, and probably some people left with them or have left since or whatever. But so I don't know, the status of Rocksteady and what they would do next is interesting, to say the least. But yeah, in terms of like, if they sold a stake of the video game business, I don't know who. I mean, like none of these articles seem to be floating like potential buyers or anything like that, or like, hey, here's who might buy it. Obviously Warner was exploring these types of sales during the pandemic, and went during and like not long after the merger with Discovery, and there was talk that like, okay, like everything's on the table, like we're selling NetherRealm, we're gonna do this, or at least that the talk was there. But they ended up holding on to just about all of it. I think they sold off like a mobile studio and maybe like one other thing. But they ended up holding on to it. Selling a stake in it lets these studios continue to work with Warner properties. It also prevents Warner from losing access to something like Mortal Kombat, which has transmedia potential. Obviously, I believe they already shot the second movie, right? So That last Mortal Kombat movie was pretty good for what it was, for what it needed to be. That was a decent little film. It was a good time. Was it the 1000% authentic, like this is an authentic retelling of the story of Mortal? No, they made a movie. They did the thing you do when you make a movie. Is like, okay, we need to like make this move along a little bit, and you have 30 hours to make a story mode full of cutscenes. We have 90 minutes to have people kick each other's ass. So let's get on with that. And they made their new character, and you know, they're like, here's, you know, we'll introduce you to this universe by virtue of here's a character who is totally new to this universe. It's a decent way to go. They should have got The Miz to play Johnny Cage for the second one, but it sounds like they did not. But what are you going to do? But anyway, point being, if Warner just sells a stake in these studios and not the entire thing, that was, I think, some of the sticking points around them trying to sell the studios last time was like, hey, do you want to buy all our game studios? You don't get any of the IP. So don't go thinking you can make a new Batman game if you buy Rocksteady, because we're not going to let you do that unless you want to license it from us for X, Y, and Z. And so people were like, okay, no, then what? I could just hire all these people. We could just start a new studio across the street and hire them. If I'm not getting IP, what, you know, why would I buy it? So by selling a stake, I would assume that leads to a situation where it at least solves part of that problem of, okay, now you can buy a percentage of these studios and we'll have this joint venture for the gaming group, and you guys can keep making Mortal Kombat games and Batman and, you know, whatever else, because we're here too. I assume that's why they would carve it up this way. But what the fuck do I know? Prison Architect 2. That's what I know. It's been delayed indefinitely. It was a month away from release. Paradox cannot catch a break on video games lately, it seems. Prison Architect 2 was delayed a handful of times. This comes to us from videogameschronicle.com. The Prison Architect 2 team posted a thing. They have delayed this game a handful of times. It was originally, the last date they had was September 3rd. And they posted a message to their message boards delaying the release further. Hello, architects. We have some difficult news to share. Unfortunately, we will not release Prison Architect 2 on September 3rd because we need more time to improve both the game's performance and its content. Our continuous internal reviews and beta test groups have highlighted areas that we need to focus on more, mainly performance and content, which that's kind of the two parts of a game. If the content is not, we need to work on the content. Also, the tech end of it is not doing what we want it to do. Like, that's the... Anyway, mainly performance and content, which we need to address before launch to ensure you, the players, get a good experience in the game. We need to raise the quality a bit more to meet the standards we'd like to achieve with the sequel. We're confident that the sequel to Prison Architect will be great, and we're looking forward to showing you all the new ideas brought into it, the switch to 3D, multi-floors, and the new behavior system that all bring a new dimension to the game and open new gameplay possibilities for the players. However, we want to make sure the game lives up to the franchise's legacy and is released in a state that satisfies both you, our players, and the Prison Architect 2 teams at Koku and Prison Interactive. They are not committing to a new release date. At this stage, we can't commit to a new release date as we need to reassess the scope of the work needed to be done before the game is release ready. Over the next few months, we will focus on improving the game and building a more robust release timeline. This also means we will be limiting our communication with you until we have a timeline we feel comfortable with. With this indefinite delay, pre-orders on all platforms will be refunded and the pre-order items will be added to the base game. So obviously, Paradox just went through this with the City Skylines 2 DLC that came out that everyone didn't like. Oh, that was the other. Yeah, the Tectonic Studio was closed in June. They canceled the game Life by You. That was their Sims style game that they were like, oh, this game is not gonna another kind of late in the game sort of like, hey, this game's coming out soon. Oh wait, no, it's never coming out. Prison Architect 2, at least they are saying, hey, this is still going to come out. Do you believe them is a different question entirely. I don't know how you get this close to, obviously the game got delayed. It was originally due in May, and I think there was even a date before that. Before this September date came along. And so I don't know how you get to a month before release and you're like, yeah, this is still not coming. And we're, is it a situation where there's just been some internal argument for the last 6 to 8 months or more of like someone going, this game is not ready. We cannot ship this game in this state. We're doing everything we can, but I can tell you right now, it is not going to get to where it needs to get to. And then like someone else going like, yeah, that's cool. This is our ship date. So do what you can, I guess. And then someone eventually steps in and goes like, hey, we just had to cancel, like City Skylines 2 was a fucking a real bummer for us across the board. And then we had this DLC issue. We just had to cancel this Sims thing fucking completely. We cannot afford to be putting out fucking trash right now. Better for us to just take the hit on this and try to work it out and try to get it where it needs to go. Like, did they finally get a meeting with the guy who actually makes the decision and bypass the middle guy who was like, no, we're shipping in September. No, we can't. No. And then finally that person was like, oh yeah, you're right. We can't fucking ship this. Holy shit. It's a real crazy. Real crazy. Half-Life. You heard of this thing? It's a scientist. He's got a crowbar, and then he gets teleported to some crazy other land. And there's a guy with a briefcase who's like maybe a government guy, but maybe he's an alien too. I don't know. What's the fucking actual story of fucking Half-Life 2? It was aliens, Vortigaunts, and weird, City 17. I could say things from Half-Life, but if you want me to string those things together into something that resembles a cohesive storyline, I don't actually have it. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember what happened in Half-Life 2. Or the episodes, for that matter. I mean, you meet the dog guy, the big robot dog thing. You drive a car. You find a way to stick the gnome into the front of the car. And you don't go to Ravenholm. There's aliens. They do an experiment at Black Mesa, and maybe that opens a wormhole of some kind. Is that what happens? They run the experiment and it opens some kind of crazy fucking wormhole. Is that how aliens? And then you're kind of like a strike force. Like at this point, you're resisting against the guys that talk like radios. And then I don't know where Skibbity Toilet fits into this. Like, okay, so the government man is in a toilet. And the other guys have cameras for heads. So I don't... Project White Sands is a little 3-word phrase that showed up on the resume of a voice actor named Natasha Chandel. And it was listed as Project White Sands video game, TBA, from Valve. White Sands is of course, then people were off to the races. White Sands is a park in New Mexico, and New Mexico is where Black Mesa was located. So this has led people back into full-on fucking holy shit, it's happening mode for Half-Life 3. And we're back, baby. Like, it's here we are again. Here we are again. Everyone's like, they're gonna make Half-Life 3. Nothing's been announced. The voice actor has since removed the reference to Project White Sands from her resume on her website. In fact, the whole website was down at some point here. Might have just been from traffic to it. Do you think that these are my favorite leaks? These are the good leaks. When it's just a voice actor who's just like, here's the thing I did. I'm just updating my resume with the stuff I did. Like, I don't know anything about the video game industry and how secretive it is and how fucking weird people are. I work in a real industry, and we can put things like this on resumes. It's not that big a deal. Why is everyone freaking? Oh God, please stop hitting me. I don't think you. What's the benefit to, so what has happened? What has happened over the last, what is it? The last was 20 years since Half-Life 2? Or I guess the episode, when did episode 2 come out? When was the last, like, proper non-VR Half-Life thing? Episode 2 was 2007. Half-Life Alyx was 2020? Yeah, 2020. I guess that counts. You could I think there's plenty of room to do more in the Half-Life universe. Is there any gold in that mine? Is there anything left in finishing the fight for Gordon Freeman? If you finish Gordon's story, are people ever going to be satisfied with it at this point? And that I imagine that these are all the things that every time anyone who works at Valve says the words Half-Life, at some point, like, there's someone there who goes, wait, why? No, what? Why do you want to fucking, like, why do you want to end that? Like, it'll never go well. It'll never go well. Why would we even do that? Why would you open us up to that? Like, so I don't know. The idea of, like, and I think Half-Life Alyx was perfect in a lot of ways, right? Or, like, here's a thing. It's a side story with characters that you know of. It is, it has a reason to exist because it is a big showpiece for new technology that we have been investing in. And so here it is for this. And, like, there's, like, the reasons for why you would make Half-Life 3. And I've said this for a very long time. We were saying this about Steam machines back in the day. That, like, oh, well, they need a reason to return to Half-Life because of the shit that's stuck to it now after all the years of, like, built up expectations that people have for whatever the fuck Half-Life means to them. And so you need to have some larger reason to make a new Half-Life game because that can help drive people to a new technology. And, well, look, Half-Life Alyx did not make VR a massive success, I suppose. So Maybe I was wrong about that. But at the time we were like, oh, you know, I think Dave Snyder was like, they're going to make Half-Life 3 and it's going to be fucking Linux only because it's only going to run on Steam machines and they're going to get people to buy Steam machines by making Half-Life an exclusive. Nah, they're maybe not, but like, but maybe they release it around the same time, and then maybe there's a thing that fits in there. Is kind of how I always viewed it. But I always viewed it as you needed a reason, not just hey, let's finish the story. You needed like a hey, here's why now we are returning to Half-Life and making this happen. So I, you know, at this point, like the idea of just like, hey, you know, and we know nothing about this, literally nothing, zero. All we have is there was a resume on someone's site that said Project White Sands and that it was something by Valve and that it was a video game. That's it. Everything else is inferred. Might not even be. I mean, Valve has another game in the works, right? A bunch of that stuff from that whatever action MOBA thing, like that, a ton of stuff is leaked from that. Maybe that's Project White Sands for all we know. You know, maybe she does a character voice in whatever that thing is supposed to be. And they just called it that because they wanted to call it that. Like again, people literally know nothing about this. They are just taking White Sands and New Mexico and Black Mesa, and they are fucking going, we're back. Half-Life. It's happening. And maybe it is. And maybe they'll just kill it again. Maybe it'll be another VR game. Maybe that, you know, they're getting their standalone VR headset ready. Maybe that's finally happening. And that they're making a new Half-Life game for that. And so maybe there'll be another VR Half-Life game to launch on their standalone VR headset, their Quest competitor, which has a code name. There is some Valve code name around VR headset. The index was codenamed Utah Deckard. That's what it was. Yeah, the codename Deckard thing. Which maybe that still happens. Or maybe they're just like, hey, we don't need to make another VR headset. Maybe they're just like, the index is good enough and we don't, you know, there's nothing for us to be gained to gain by putting out a better VR headset at this point in time. Unless it is a standalone thing. I think there's a really good reason, a really good case to be made, rather, for Valve saying, hey, we have gotten really good with Proton, we've gotten really good with Linux, we've gotten really good at this like portable device. Can we do a variant of that is a VR headset and make this a standalone thing that you can wirelessly tether or wiredly tether to your PC to play proper Steam VR, but also there's a portable variant of Steam VR that we can just put into the guts of this thing, and that's Deckard, presumably. The last time I read up on Deckard, that's what it sounded like anyway. I think that makes a lot of sense. Insofar as a VR headset can make sense at this point in time in any way, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Do you think they're going to, I guess, like, do you think that they're ever going to make another Half-Life thing ever again? You stretch this out on a long enough timeline, eventually someone goes, I got an idea. Or they have a good business reason to do it, or a good, like, tie-in for some hardware, or, you know, whatever it is. But do you think they do it? Do you think Half-Life Alyx ends up being the kind of final thing? You know, do they revisit Portal? Aperture Desk Job kind of revisits Portal, or I guess the Portal end of the shared universe that both those things exist in, I guess, if you want to be technical about it. But like, I don't think they do a Portal 3. I think, you know, I could see them doing some smaller stuff. Like Valve at this point, as much as they can kind of do anything they want to do, I think when you look at where they spend their time and where they spend their effort over the last like decade or so, 2 decades, really, it's been on multiplayer games. It's been on, you know, here's Counter-Strike 2. You know, here's like, we're going to launch CS2. It's them releasing a fix for like a partial fix for Team Fortress 2 after years of letting it languish in bot hell. It's whatever this other thing they're working on, this deadlock thing that everyone's got leaked footage of supposedly. I look at that stuff. I look at Dota. Like I look at that and go like, clearly a lot of Valve's interests, whether they be financial or just the personal interests of the people who work there and the games that they enter into development with and all that other stuff. Clearly they have a real interest in making these kind of competitive multiplayer games that could potentially have an esports future, you know? So I don't know, like the idea of like, hey, we're going to make another single player story driven first person shooter where a silent man doesn't talk to aliens. I don't, it's hard to see it happening, but at the same time, you know, with the amount of money that Valve brings in, with the right pitch, they could do just about anything they want to fucking do. So, you know, it's hard to really, you know, they're not, their motivations don't seem like they are always purely lined up with that, right? Of like, hey, this is the thing that's going to make us the most money. This is, you know, they've already got, you know, they've already got people working on updating CS2, and, you know, they put a fighting game into Dota this year. It's not an amazing fighting game. For a fighting game that exists inside of Dota, it's amazing. But on its own merits, it's not like some incredible thing. It's just like, wow, this is really cool. This is a fun little thing. And then the other thing, you know, which looks like it's just another fucking MOBA of some kind. But yeah, I don't know what the fuck Valve does from here. But like this idea of like, hey, they did a bunch of VO for a thing. Who knows? Like I said, maybe this deadlock thing was known as Project White Sands at some point in development when they were recording VO for it. That doesn't sound likely, but what the fuck do we know? Maybe for a 6-week period when they recorded some VO, they were referring to it as Project White Sands, and then they stopped. And then they said, like, no, instead we're calling it Neon Prime. No, instead we're calling it this. No, instead we're calling, you know. Like, it's easy to pretend like, you know, like, oh, no, it was this. It was definitely this. Like, maybe they told voice actors something different. What the fuck do we know? Maybe another company was recording VO for something else entirely and just told the voice actor it was Valve. Like, there were a lot of people that did voice for previous GTA games that didn't even know what the fuck they were doing until they had done it. You know? Peter Moore is in the news. Good news. This is an interesting, like, local news story. The LA News, reporting on Peter Moore and his newfound, or I guess like his additional respect for the Apple Watch. The quote here from him is, he was, I guess, okay. The former tech executive was on the way to the airport to pick up his daughter when he felt off. I felt a little lightheaded and a little faint, and like a typical male, I thought, I'll go to Starbucks, that'll fix it. But then he got a notification from his phone that started to ping and said low heart rate. And so he looked at it, said that his heart rate had dropped to 32. And so he called his wife, who told him not to move. She came to get him and rushed him to the hospital. And then the quote here from Peter Moore is, the doctor kind of theatrically ran in and said, this is not good. This is not good. You need a pacemaker right now. And so the Apple Watch is being credited as saving Peter Moore's life. He's not the only story, he's not the only story like this. There's been a number of people over the years that have said that notifications from the phone have saved them. And the cardiac electrophysiologist that treated Moore said yes, his watch had a big role in saving his life. And when I asked Moore how he feels now, he said, "I feel great. While he's always embraced technology, he's not taking his Apple Watch off anytime soon. I think that the wearable market in particular, for the value it provides, not just in your daily life, but literally informing you about your health in real time. And in my instance, I think saving my life." Best wishes to Peter Moore. It sounds like he's doing well on the other side of all of that. Holy shit. Holy shit, man. And he's just billed as like it's funny because I think we tend to think about Peter Moore as like, that's Peter fucking Moore, man. But here he's the former tech executive, was on his way to pick up his not a lot of not mentioning his sports career, sports executive career, I suppose here, but best wishes to Peter Moore and his family for making it through that. Holy shit. And that's going to do it for the news. podcast@guard.bike is the email address. You can send in emails to me, and I will read them. Let's see here. Steven writes in and says, I was unpacking some tech stuff I threw in a box years ago this past weekend and came across my PlayStation Classic I picked up at Target for $20 when they finally realized no one wanted one. I decided to set it up and spent the next 7 hours playing Jumping Flash. I knew what Jumping Flash was, as I've always been a PlayStation player, but I never played it. To my amazement, it's an incredible video game. Touching on another point someone emailed in recently, I wish Sony would fund more small, weirder stuff like this again. Jumping Flash VR sounds like a great way to throw up. To my question, has there ever been a game that you've always known about but never tried, and when you finally got around to it 5, 10, or 15 years later, you absolutely loved it? Well, Jumping Flash is a cool game. It's hard I feel like it's really hard to go back to because of the nature of analog controls and how games control these days, we don't really think about it the same. We don't really think about it the same, like those pre-analog first-person games. And so Jumping Flash is a really hard, like I want to play Jumping Flash, and then I go back to play it, and I'm like, oh, right, you have to kind of strafe with this, and like all these weird kind of look up and down buttons, and stuff just wasn't really there yet. But I've known about a lot of 8-bit Nintendo games that I kind of never really went back to play, or boxes that I've seen that as we've been ranking all these Nintendo games, there's definitely been some stuff that I've kind of like played for the first time or played again for the first time after years and years and years of or maybe I played it for 5 minutes at a trade show 30 years ago, and now I'm coming back to it and be like, oh wait, this is actually like really impressive. Like there's been a number of games on that list that I think have been surprising in that specific way. Or like situations where it's like maybe you played a game, the first 10 minutes of it here, the first 10 minutes of there, but like really sitting down and be like, okay, let's really think about this game and play a bunch of it. And going, oh wait, okay. Like there's something really awesome here at the heart of this that I am surprised by. That is definitely something that has happened. Zune writes in and says, I've been playing Cyberpunk on my PC with a PlayStation 5 controller, and the adaptive trigger support is some of the best I've experienced so far. Shooting guns, punching people, reckless driving all have well-tuned feedback, which enhances a player's immersion, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of the controller in general, and the adaptive trigger support is even more of a reason for me to use it. Both my controllers, bought in January 2021, suffer from noticeable stick drift. I managed to open one of them and clean it out, which fixed it for a while, but it eventually returned. I don't believe there are other controllers with the same level of adaptive triggers. Am I just doomed? I don't want stick drift. Is the DualSense Edge better? Are the new controller versions better? Please help. Yeah, this stick drift thing, man. It sucks that this is still something that is, you know, all these generations of games, and, you know, we've had Hall effect triggers and stuff like that over the years. Like, you know, the Dreamcast solved this stuff. The DualSense Edge, I will say, is better from the stick drift perspective, but only because you can replace the sticks. Not because they're like better made and they're not going to drift. I think they are a little bit. I do like the way they feel. But you can pop the DualSense Edge open down here and replace the sticks. So bare minimum, if you get stick drift on one of these, at least all you have to do is pop it open and replace the sticks. Which is not a great answer to the question, because you still have to buy the sticks, and also this controller is like just under $200. But no, there are, I don't believe there are any other third-party controllers or any other controllers out there that do have adaptive trigger support specifically to that Sony standard. That you could use, that you would get instead of these. And even, man, like, the adaptive trigger support on PC is really light. There are cases where games on PS5 support it that don't on PC. And even when you do get it to support it on PC, the controller has to be plugged in, and like there's like hoops you have to jump through. That you shouldn't have to deal with. Count Markula in the chat says, I think Scuff makes a DualSense with Hall effect sticks. But since Scuff is making like esports controllers, I don't know if they even have adaptive triggers, do they? Because usually that's, you know, the first thing you're turning off when you're esportsing it up. You're usually turning those triggers off anyway. And some of those Scuff controllers, I don't know if it's all of them, but I think some of them are like just modified real controllers, aren't they? Maybe not these PS5 controllers. Maybe they're building these themselves these days. But Scuff has controllers they will happily sell you for $260 fucking dollars, which is the $260 model just says here removes vibration modules. So yeah. The high-end competitive controllers, they yank all that stuff out anyway. So not a good replacement. Ian in PA writes in with maybe this is a little, I don't know. As someone who created their own branding, how difficult was it with no input from stakeholders? You got to be as creative as you wanted. It's your own podcast and Patreon. With Blaster, you've talked about the challenges on Game Boys to Men. On the Jeff Gerstmann show, you've discussed CBS ownership. With this most recent venture, you seemingly had free reign to name it all yourself. How did you restrain yourself to only naming it after yourself? So the way I this was not the name. The Jeff Gerstmann show was not the name that I trademark researched and registered domains for and registered social media handles for and everything else. Like, I had a whole thing. Yes, it was projectwhitesands.com. No, I had a whole thing lined up. In the months that I was thinking about leaving, I started sitting down and thinking about names. Like, what would I want to name it next? What would be the next thing I would want to use as a name for the thing I'm doing? And I ended up with a really long list of things, and there were like 2 that I liked, and I ended up trademark researching one of them, and that was the one I was going to go with. I was like, okay, I have an idea for what the logo to this looks like in my head. I have a basic idea for what this thing would be. And then like I kind of just didn't think about it for a little while because it was like, well, okay, I'm going to get through E3 and then I'll probably put in notice and leave the company at that point. And then, before, well, I guess Summer Games Fest, not E3, but, and then they pulled the trigger on me before I could pull the trigger on them, which works out great because then there's severance and all this other stuff. And I'm like, all right. But it did mean that suddenly the timetable for a lot of stuff had changed, and also the attitude and the potential for like, are they going to be dicks about it changed. The name in question was not designed as something that was meant to be a reference to the thing I worked on before. But as I sat there and ran through it in my head in terms of like, okay, now what if they're hostile towards me about it? Would they be dicks in this specific way? Like, just, it would clear copyright, but will it cause problems for me getting this thing off the ground? And I got cold feet on the name and threw it out. And then very quickly was just like, okay, here we go. I'm going to just call it the Jeff Gerstmann Show because I own my fucking name. And so went in that direction. It was like the day before this all launched, I got a heads up from someone who still works at that company that was like, hey, just want to let you know that the legal team reached out to me and asked me if I knew what you were going to say on your live stream that you have planned tomorrow. So just so you know, they are paying close attention. I'm like, fuck. All right, shit. Because the last thing you want is to launch a business and have someone hold it up with a bunch of fucking lawsuits. And so it was like, okay, all right, I'm gonna fucking pump the brakes on these names, and they didn't have logos anyway. And so that's why, and I want to redo all the logos and artwork and all this other stuff because it's stuff I literally fucking made the night before. Or in 2 days before that, because I kind of had 2 weeks to sit on it and go like, fuck. And so that's why all of it was incredibly hastily fucking thrown together. And I like whatever. It looks fine, but like the logo to the Discord server should probably not be Donkey Kong from Atari 2600 Donkey Kong. Like it should probably, there's a, and so like I actually spent a lot of time yesterday. So like branding and naming shit sucks. It can be really fun, but it's only really fun when you have a lot of people to bounce off of. And I don't right now. So like, I mean, I do, but not people I'm like directly working with, right? Not people that are, as you say, stakeholders. I have friends I can go to and be like, what do you think about this? And they'll be like, I don't know. But it's not quite the same. And so, yeah. So, the art will change at some point. A lot of like, even the music for the podcast was something that was just like picked out as like, oh shit, this would be really funny. And it is. But like there's a part of me that is driven crazy by all of it. And so like that's because I know why it happened. I know how it fucking it's like, oh shit. Like how ramshackle all that stuff really was. And so like I just want to, there are designers that I know are, looking for work in some cases, and people that I'm like, oh, this would be a person that would be great to work with, or a handful of people that some of whom have reached out over the past couple of years that are probably way too busy to do it now. But there's multiple people, but I don't have a direction in mind yet. That's been the biggest problem, right? Is like, okay, I know I need to redo it, and I have ideas for about 4 different pieces of merchandise that I want to do and sell. But I don't have I can't contribute to that conversation from a design perspective. Like, what is the aesthetic of this thing, basically? Like, what do I want it to look like? And so I don't have a good answer to that question yet. And so that has been the thing that has been the holdup in why I haven't really gone and done any of this work yet. But I spent like half the day yesterday filling up a document full of stuff, because there's a couple of things. I'm also back in the business if I have to name something, because I'm trying to get this interview show off the ground. Now that, my daughter's going to start school next week, and that will change a lot of things about our schedules again, I think. And, and the baby's now 9 months old and she's starting to teethe, which is a good reminder of just like, oh man, yeah, we have a baby. Like a baby. It's like we for the last 5 years, we have had a baby ass baby around doing baby ass baby things. Like last night, my wife brought her down because she's teething. So she's, she can be unpleasant. She's unhappy at certain parts of the day. So I had her at about 4 a.m. this morning, and we're hanging out. And it's that realization was just like, yeah, I'm not back to my full strength. Like my brain is not where it was 5 years ago, because like I haven't had a good night's sleep in 5 years. And like the kids will all get a little bit older, and then a lot of things will change on that front, but whatever. So long story short, I'm finally trying to get this interview show off the ground. And so I need to name it. And so I'm sitting there writing down like the worst names in the world, terrible names. But you can't get to the name unless you like try to figure out like what you're going for, like what you want the name to convey and everything else. And there's a science to naming things. I know someone who started her own like branding firm, like back before that was a thing. And she was in the business of just like people would hire her as a consultant to come in and name shit. And I was like, that sounds fun. And now I'm more like, that sounds like a fucking nightmare. So yeah, so I've been going through that process, and and merchandise has to happen, right? I mean, you're not a real podcast until you're selling coffee cups, man. So what the fuck are we doing? Right? So yeah, I don't know. So that's like, there's a part of me that, like would potentially be down to rename the entire operation, but like, I don't, it's too late for that. Right. This podcast is already named. But yeah, I'm like thinking about naming and branding and all this other stuff is really interesting and weird when you are doing it all by yourself, because it is really, Jim in the chat says, naming stuff is easy. You just write down 900 things and then decide on something that isn't on the list. The last several times that I've been a part of something being named, that is exactly how it has gone. That is how the thing that I ended up not using went. I had all these other names that I'm like, oh, this is perfect. I'm like, no, wait, no. And then settled on another thing that I also didn't use. So yeah, it's definitely, yeah. So I don't know that I like naming after yourself is, fine. But what happens down the road if I expand and there are more people on the show? Right? Or, like that sort of stuff. Like there are limitations when you just go and immediately name it after yourself. So, I think if that were to happen down the line, and then I would probably want to change the name of the show at some point. So, but I don't know. Whatever. That's you cross that bridge when you come to it, right? We don't have to think about that right now. It's like whatever. But it is funny now because I get a bunch of junk email that is addressed one of two ways. One says, "Hello, the Jeff Gerstmann Show. We want you to do ads for this." And then the other one is like, says, "Hi, Jeff Gerstmann," all lowercase, all one word, because it's the name of the Twitch account. And it's good to know exactly where that junk mail is coming from when it is addressed that way. But branding's a weird, it's a weird thing. Grant writes in and says, here in the UK, it says, I missed the whole E3 week. Here in the UK, it would start after work each day for most people. I personally would follow everything about it for that week into the press, from the press conferences to all the old GameSpot walk around videos. It was just this exciting thing that gaming doesn't have anymore. Everyone seemed to hate on it at the time, and I never understood why, because it was the best week in gaming. Now I just never end up being excited for games, and I ignore the media today. Half the time I do not even know what games are coming out. Media sites have died, and the only other content are streamers that I feel like are for the generation below me. Does anyone really care about these state of plays or Nintendo Directs? They're like these small pre-recorded videos focusing on a few games, usually ones I do not care about, like Smash Brothers for the 100th time. I think you're talking about like 5 different issues there, right? I mean, you know, if the games getting announced are not to your liking, like that's a separate problem from the way that they get announced, right? I think that sometimes the Nintendo Directs try to maybe do a little too much and have a few too many games on it. Like I don't. This is going to sound like a blanket statement, and obviously everything is conditional, and there are always going to be exceptions to rules. Because I can like a nice quiet game from time to time, but like but at the same time, I don't want to watch trailers for cozy games. I don't need to be on the cutting edge of what's happening in the world of cozy games. I can wait for the cozy games to come out. And then when someone says, no, this one's actually good, I can check it out then. I think that's kind of a difference, is that there's a lot of trailers for a lot of games. Like, yeah, there's so many games coming out all the time now. So many games coming out all the time that focusing on games that are not out yet almost seems dumb. In a weird way, you know, like watching trailers for anything. You're just like, whatever, man. This game's out tomorrow. This other game's out right now. This game's out here. So like the idea of getting excited about like these 20 trailers that are all just slammed together, and you're like, well, this one's okay. This one, you're a bear in a forest. This one, you're a guy in a forest. Are we dating anyone in these games? Yes, we are. Like, like it's okay. There's a lot of stuff like that from smaller games that you just go like, but at the same time, I think a lot of people lament how hard it is to announce a game, promote a game, get a game in front of people, all of that stuff. And so it's hard to knock people for like, hey, we got our trailer put into the Nintendo Direct. Isn't that cool? Like, yeah, it's cool. Like it didn't do anything for me, and I forgot the name of the game immediately because there were 5 other bigger games there, but like you got eyeballs on your game. That's awesome. So I don't know, but I don't know what the right answer is there. So I guess the other thing I'd say is the E3 week didn't necessarily, as long as you are finding out about games that you are going to pre-order and or buy, it's mission accomplished. The idea of it has to happen during the course of a full week. None of that actually matters. The excitement does, though. So when you have these situations where you're saying, I'm not getting excited about games anymore, like, I don't think I think the format change can only be so responsible for that. And the rest of it has to be, a little more personal, a little more like maybe you're not into the games that are being announced the same way, which I hear a lot of people say. And also, you know, digital releases of games have made it so the idea of pre-ordering a game is even dumber. So the ideas of like, we got to start this pre-order campaign and get this trailer out here. We got to do this, and 6 months out, we got to, you know that we have this many pre-orders, and we're going to go to Walmart and we're going to do this. And it's like all of those needs are different on the industry side. So I don't know. I think the tighter window of we announced a game and it got released in a month or, 2 months, or, like the very short window, like the Mortal Kombat windows this last time here, where they announced it and kind of like said, like, hey, in 3 months, this thing's going to be just fucking out. Like, oh, wow. Okay, cool. Like they just formally announced the DLC. They said that something was coming. So you knew that there was going to be some story DLC for Mortal Kombat 1 down the line. But they just announced it at Comic-Con and it's out next month. I think that works. I think you need to kind of like have things be a little more near term so they feel more like action items, right? Of like, oh, well, I should pre-order this because it's out real soon. I miss all the E3 stuff as well, of course. I mean, of course I do. It was a lot of fun to see everything all in one place. It was a lot of fun to see everything set against each other almost competitively, even if that wasn't really the case. I thought that stuff was fun. I miss it too, for sure. It was exciting, but like, did that excitement always translate into the best way for a game to be shown and announced and pre-ordered and whatever else? Like, if your game is not the biggest of the big, then it's getting lost in the shuffle. I think that's still, again, I think that shuffle still happens in some of these Nintendo Directs. State of Play, less so, because the State of Plays feel like they're just like, we got 5 games. Whereas Nintendo Directs are like, here's seemingly 25 indie games back to back to back to back to back with like a Donkey Kong game thrown in the middle. And you're like, oh, Funky Kong is back. And I think that they get eyes on those games that wouldn't be there otherwise. So it's hard to shit on it, really. But like, at the same time, people come away from those things talking about hey, Donkey Kong is back. Not all, and that's not entirely true. There are some people that very much do this, but like, it's hard for those games to even punch through in the context of being in those directs sometimes. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I think that, being excited, I love it that when people are excited for coverage of video games, because I think that there should be more coverage of video games. More editorial style coverage of video games. There's not as much. That's part of the other problem is, you can't just go to a website every day and see the new trailers that, filtered through a person who's trying to say like, hey, here's the stuff that actually matters. Like, I try to do that, but like, I can't, there's stuff that matters that I can't get to because I'm just one person. There are teams of 4 or more that can't get to everything that they ideally should be getting to, and so it's hard to even act as a filter for that anymore because so many things are coming out all the time. And yeah, the death of monoculture conversation that we seem to have around these parts every 6 to 18 months is definitely a thing as well. Like, as everything is spread out, everyone's in different bubbles hearing about different games. There are people out there that have probably never heard of click holding, if you can believe it. What? Which has Twitch integration now, and that makes me want to try it again. So maybe we'll stream some anyway. Yeah, so I don't know. Like, I'm with you, but like, at the end of the day, the thing that serves the industry the best is you being interested in the games and not necessarily being interested in the coverage of the games, if that makes any sense. Ideally, it's both. I think when it's both, I think that really lines up really well, and one helps the other. It is this kind of symbiotic thing in a lot of ways, but I think it's really hard to follow games and what's happening in games. It's part of why I place a high value on a website that has a good, clean, well-written news feed. And it's why have become such a fan of videogameschronicle.com, and Eurogamer, I think, does a really well in a similar boat. And yes, like my RSS is like, it's those two. It's Gematsu, which covers more Japanese stuff that would fall through the cracks otherwise. And those are probably, that's kind of like, I think you get most of the news story. You see the news cycle that way. Those are not the only RSS feeds I subscribe to, but I think like if I were trying to pare it down and not necessarily like and not necessarily like trying to put news in a podcast, then I would probably do it a little differently. GamesBeat is like all crypto stuff now or something. Like it's at some point GamesBeat went down the like, let's interview a bunch of NFT people about how cool it all is, and it's just like, I don't need that. And IGN has a lot of really good, well-written news stories, but if you subscribe to their RSS feed, it's like there's a lot that goes up on that website that you just never see otherwise, and it's like a bunch of shopping related articles and all that other stuff that is not necessarily what I'm looking for. But I still subscribe to that feed because there's like, they will break stories, they will get out there and report on stuff that is not being covered any other way. I'll read Kotaku also. Kotaku is hard to read sometimes because they don't update the homepage anymore. Or rather, the homepage is not built for humans. The homepage feels like it is built for machines. And so if you scroll down the Kotaku homepage, once you get out of like the first block of news stories that are all like recent and big, you get to like it's like one or two scrolls away from like the same story about like the PlayStation 5 is in its home stretch and here's why that's a bummer or whatever. Like there's just been stories that have been on the Kotaku homepage for like 6 months or something. I assume that is something that is being done deliberately by someone for SEO reasons, but also everyone has shed staff over the past few years, and so I imagine it's hard to find time to, or maybe you don't have people in place to fully update the page every single day. We used to have people whose whole job it was, or like 80% of their job was updating a bunch of hub pages every day, and it was fucking garbage. When we hired Ryan, that was his job for a good long time, was to update those pages and to make sure the top slot of the website was updated and make sure that all the other weird pages on the site, the PS2 shooting page was refreshed at least once a week. Just terrible. Let's see. Vince from Philly writes in and says, which rapper has the best ad libs? I've always been partial to Jeezy's punch-ins, like, yeah, and Pusha T's, yuck. What are your favorites? I think E40 is the best at this. I think a good out of E40 is just outstanding. Yes, Jadakiss's laugh is fantastic and silly. But yeah, those are probably the first couple that just come to mind immediately. Adam from Portland writes in with an audio-visual quandary. My living room setup has a horrible quirk where, without going into detail, I must choose between Dolby Atmos sound or a 120 hertz refresh rate when using my Xbox Series X. The PS5 does not have this problem on the same exact setup. If I pick Atmos sound, I get 60 hertz. If I pick 120 hertz, I get stereo sound. What choice would you make in this situation? It takes about 2 minutes to swap cables around to make the change, and Googling shows lots of others in this same boat with no solution from Microsoft. Yeah, I'd buy a new sound bar, dude. I'd go with 120 hertz, but also, how many games support 120 hertz on Xbox? That's probably the larger question. It's Call of Duty. There are a bunch of games that do it, but it's like slightly more than you think, but also not nearly all of them. You know, I think even the first Descendant runs at 120 on console. There are a number of games that do, like I said, Call of Duty has for a while. But it's not as many as you like. I don't know, man. Like, I will say, my solution to this is headphones, or I would probably just go with headphones and 120 hertz. But also, what if instead you bought a PC and you got a monitor that could do 360 hertz? Also, yes, just because the consoles support 120 hertz mode doesn't mean the games are going to run at a locked 120 the entire thing, the entire way. And you would want a variable refresh rate screen. That's what you would actually want is 120 hertz on a VRR screen, because none of those games actually run at most of those games don't run at a locked solid 120. So if you've got variable refresh, which I feel like most screens that do 120 do VRR also. Maybe not, but I feel like most of the ones I've encountered have been that way. Also, I'm not super sold on Atmos sound. I don't know, man. I've been using the fucking speakers on this TV since I moved in here. I took my receiver and just fucking set it in the garage, because I knew I didn't want to fucking mount speakers on walls and, set up all the 5.1 bullshit and whatever else. So I'm just HDMI into the TV, man. Fuck it. And I can come out ARC and get it soundbar. Like, I looked at sound bars for a little while, and then I was just like, dude, I don't even fucking care. So maybe I'm the wrong person to ask, because at this point, like, I'm playing most stuff on the PC, and I'm wearing these exact headphones. And if you're doing Atmos through, like, AirPods, I don't know if can you do AirPod Pros hooked up to a console and get Dolby Atmos that way? Or is that only on your phone, John? I don't know if that's a possible scenario, but I would say, I don't know. Like, I for a while there, I was looking at sound bars and just going like, I don't know, that might be interesting. Like, they're not expensive. And, if the magic virtual speaker technology they're talking about actually work, then maybe that would be neat. But I don't know, man. And then the TVs themselves have all sorts of fucking weird 3D virtual fucking speaker horse shit built in as well. Because now that the remote controls have speakers built into them, you can just hit a button on it and it'll measure measure your room and try to tune the sound appropriately. I did that a couple of times and I was like, I don't know, that seems interesting, but it's not good. I don't know, man. I was not a believer in 5.1 Dolby Surround, Dolby Digital, any of that shit when the original Xbox came out, and they were first trying to bring surround sound to consoles in a big way, because developers weren't using it all that often. And so the line my go-to on that back then was like, oh, cool, I can hear footsteps behind me. But it was my own footsteps because that's how they fucking mapped it for whatever weird reason. And there was not a lot of reason to have rear speakers because most games just weren't built for it. Or even the games that had 5.1 support just didn't seem like they were really taking advantage of all those fucking speakers. And so it just seemed like a giant waste of time for a long time. But finally, I was like, you know what? I need to buy a fucking setup here. I need to have it in my home. Like, if games are going to go in that direction and I am to fucking continue to review games, I'm going to have to be able to speak on this sooner or later. So I used that to justify me buying a fucking receiver because I'm an idiot. And then, you know, like I'm playing like Burnout 3 with those speakers. Like the nice thing about those speakers, and it's less so about the rear speakers and more just about having a center channel and a subwoofer and all that stuff, is like you could make it real fucking loud. And that was cool. I was playing Burnout. I believe Burnout Revenge. Real fucking loud when the cops raided my house. And so I did not hear them come in and I did not hear them yell. And when I heard them yell, I thought it was a friend of mine who would come in. And so I turned and there was a cop with a gun pointed at me. And I was like, well, that's okay. Well, shit, man. What the fuck are you assholes doing in my house? Which turned out to be the wrong house on top of that. Should have sued him. My dad was just like, you should sue those fucking cops. I'm like, you're right, I should sue those fucking cops, but I didn't. They claim like, oh well, we saw a firearm. It's like my roommate had a fucking pellet rifle near the back door, and so they saw that and said, we've got to go in there. Guns drawn. Pricks. Anyway. Thanks, cops. Adam writes in and says, my older cousin got me a PS1 mod chip that plugged into the back of the console like a game genie. It opened up the wondrous world of Japan-only releases. What the hell happened to Japan-only console games? Did any other regions have exclusive games? What is your favorite Japanese release? Yeah, I mean, what happened is that, you know, the industry got bigger, the cost to make games became larger, and developers by and large are trying to make games for a worldwide audience. You do still see releases that don't come over, and you know, like there are, if you can just go create, it's fun to do even if you don't intend to buy anything. You can jump through the hoops to create a Japanese account on your console and you can just view the Japanese store. Even if you're not going to, and you can also jump through the hoops of like going to a website and buying a scratched off points card that will let you put points on your Japanese account, and you can buy games that way, which is fun as well. But yes, there are still games that only release in Japan. It definitely does still happen. It does not happen as often. Again, because, you know, a lot of developers are thinking about that worldwide audience. Like that the concept of localization and the idea of a game taking months to come over to the US is something that kind of went away over the years. Because it used to be, and fuck man, they hated us for it. But we would import all of Capcom's fighting games on the PS1 back when all that stuff was coming out all the time. And then Saturn, you know, but a lot of the Saturn games never came over. But we were running import reviews of Capcom's Japanese releases months before they would come out in the US. And then when the US version would come out, you know, it maybe there'd be like one sentence that had to be changed, or, you know, just like some minor thing that is, you know, not, you know, the score usually wasn't changing unless they did something more dramatic, or if a lot of time had passed and you're like, this game has been superseded by a zillion other games now and it's a little less impressive. And Capcom fucking hated it because they you know, it made it like we had reviews up and they were like, hey, do you want to run a preview of Tech Romancer, or, you know, whatever the fuck it was? And we're like, no, what? I mean, sure. Well, yeah, we'll run it, but like, we've already reviewed the game, you know, like we already have a full review of the game. It's not No one needs to know anything. Like everything everyone needs to know about this game is already out there. So you guys trying to get more people interested in your game this month instead of 3 months ago, like it's hard to have it happen because of localization and how that stuff worked back then. They really wanted us to stop doing that. But instead, everyone got better at localizing games and doing it up front and simultaneously releasing in multiple territories when they can and a lot of that sort of stuff. So it sort of went away. Let's see. Nason in England asks, did you ever use a Namco neGcon? I was a teenager in the 90s, and a Namco neGcon was one of many devices I coveted but never owned. By the time I was in a position to afford one, it appears to have been made obsolete by analog sticks becoming standard on controllers, so they just weren't on sale anymore. However, to this day, I remain fascinated by this controller. It's probably because I never got to hold one in my hands, but also it was just a weird and cool device. Do you have memories of using one? Were they any good? They're awesome! They're so fucking cool. Wipeout XL was so rad, like playing Wipeout games with them. So the neGcon, NEGcon, was a PlayStation controller that had twisting in the middle, and so you could steer by twisting the controller in the middle, and so you could twist the right side forward or back, or just however you wanted to twist it, you could twist it. And it also had analog gas and brake. It had just buttons on the face that were these big old analog buttons that you would push in, and it was such a weird feeling thing. But there was nothing else like it at the time. And so it was the only option you had for a while for this limited number of games. Actually, they were selling a steering wheel and an analog flight stick at some point. So some of that stuff maybe was supported there. But like, it was a really good tight option for just like playing those types of games. And it was just a neat ass controller. And it looked like weird futuristic. Like for a time when the PlayStation was brand new and you were seeing all this stuff you had never seen before, it was another one of those aspects to it where you're just like, look at this crazy fucking thing. And yeah, you can play Ridge Racer with it. That's neat. And then they did the JogCon for Ridge Racer Type 4, which just had a force feedback little tiny wheel, like a VCR in the center of the controller. And so you would steer with that. It would kind of try to jerk out of your hands a little bit, which was awesome. And then the rest of it was more like a regular kind of PlayStation controller. That was a cool controller too, but kind of only for Ridge Racer Type 4. I don't know that I ever even used it for anything else. But yes, those were awesome controllers. It's like a really limited number of games that supported it because eventually analog controls became more standard and all that sort of stuff. So yeah. That would be a cool controller now. I think. But like that would be a cool option for playing driving games these days. Like a steering like controller that you didn't need to bolt to a fucking desk and do all this other shit. That you could just kind of have analog steering this way and analog gas and brake. Maybe not on the face, but like something else there with maybe a little bit of force feedback or something. I don't know. Yeah, that'd be cool. That would still be cool. Anyway. There's an older email. Just what was up with True Crime Streets of LA? JB from Pittsburgh writes in. Why are there so many notable actors in this game? I was fairly young when this game came out and started playing it. What was the press cycle like for this game? It came out in the glory days of parties and review trips, so I'm curious if you had any stories. No, not real. No. True Crime Streets of LA, Activision put it out. It's a mess. The exciting thing I remember about True Crime Streets of LA is that it was the debut of the first single from West Side Connection's second album. Terrorist Threats was on the soundtrack to that game, and they hadn't even confirmed that there was going to be a second album at that point, I think. And so Ryan and I hooked the review build. We hooked the PlayStation 2 up to we hooked it up to a PC and fucking recorded it off and made it an MP3 so we could have it to listen to, which was very good. Yeah, I don't know. True Crime Streets of LA, the game itself, it's like, hey, here's this, kind of sub GTA ass game in an era when they made a lot of those. And I remember True Crime not necessarily being terrible, but I don't remember much about the game. It's not a very memorable game in and of itself. The New York, the New York game also was kind of like whatever. Notable actors. I mean, that was the gimmick at the time. Like GTA has a ton. Like when you go back and look at those PS2 era GTA games, they're like, hey, here's David Cross. And they didn't tell you the voice cast ahead of time for like San Andreas. And so you got the review builds of San Andreas and you were listening to it going, I think that's David Cross. You're like, oh yeah, that's definitely David Cross. And you're trying to figure out who that is definitely Samuel L. Jackson. What the fuck? Like, or you would know like, hey, it's Ray Liotta, but like you didn't know anyone else in the voice cast until you finished the game. I don't even think you could look at the credits until you had finished it. And so reviewing it before any of that information was really out there, because they sold it on the strength of it being GTA. They did not sell it on the strength of its cast. And they were able to get away with that because it's Grand Theft fucking Auto. True Crime Streets of LA, maybe not so much, but yeah, I don't remember who was in True Crime. Is Snoop in that one too? Because I know obviously there was the Midway game that was all built around Snoop that got canceled. Fear and Respect, is that what they're called? But maybe he was in this too. It's hard to remember. All these games kind of run together at some point. 187 Ride or Die, and just all this other shit. But yes, my only memory of True Crime Streets of LA is that West Side Connection song being in it and being very excited about it. And then for a while going, yeah, this game, I'm enjoying playing this game. It's like, oh no, wait, I just like this song. The game is kind of whatever. I don't remember it necessarily being bad, but anyway, that's going to do it for the show, everybody. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks for hanging out. Be back next week with more podcasts and such. And then, so next week is regular week, and then the week after that is Gamescom. So the Gamescom opening night live, I believe, is Tuesday and is kind of in part of the podcast slot. So we'll have to figure something out there. And yeah, and then of course I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do maybe we'll look at this click holding Twitch integration and see what that's all about. I don't know. We'll figure something out. And then Friday, 8-bit Nintendo games will be ranked. All right, everybody. Have a good one. Have a good rest of your week. And I will see you tomorrow or next week or some other time. One of those three.